Good evening, everyone. It's Monday, March 24th, 2014. I'd like to welcome you all to the regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. Can we have first item, Anush?
Item 1A, roll call. Commissioner Kirkjian?
Here.
Commissioner Sahakian?
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Here.
Commissioner Bartuso?
Here.
Chairperson Yakubian?
Here. Next item.
Item 1B, flag salute. Chairperson Yakubian?
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Next item, Anush.
Item 2 is posting of the agenda. The agenda for the Monday, March 24th, 2014 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, March 21st, 2014 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Next item.
Item 3 is approval of minutes at item 3A, February 24th, 2014 regular meeting.
Does anyone have any comments? Changes? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
A second? You need to.
Second. I wasn't present.
You weren't present, right? Okay. Next item, Anush.
Item 4 is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
Okay. Do we have any cards for oral? No. Okay. Okay, just a reminder, if anyone is here to speak on the agenda item number 6, please fill out a card and hand it to Anush. Thank you. Next item, Anush.
Item 5 is information only. Presentation on Metro's bus rapid transit and street design improvement study, including status of the North Hollywood to Pasadena BRT corridor.
Mr. Golanyan.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce this item. Essentially, an effort, an initiative that started back in 1990 has culminated in the inclusion of the North Hollywood to Pasadena Metro's bus rapid transit system. We have been, or this corridor has been selected one of the 5 countywide, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Cliff Henke from Parsons Brickenhoff, who is the consultant to the Metro, to give a brief presentation on the countywide bus rapid transit and street design improvements, and more particularly to the corridor that we have talked about.
Good evening, Commissioners. Also with me are my clients, basically, from LA Metro, Anel Albaran and Martha Butler. Martha's the Regional Planning Manager for Countywide Planning. This study is sort of the latest of many studies that began, frankly, when bus rapid transit was begun as a concept in this country back in the 1988-89 period, and has been even included in the regional transit plan, as you know, as a strategic unfunded project to this day. This study that we undertook for Metro had a number of objectives, but the first objective was to find 5 corridors countywide in the county that could serve as a bus rapid transit network. In addition to that, it was also a mechanism to look at how to find corridors that could serve as efficiency improvements for corridors in the countywide network. So The basic objective was to identify 5 corridors countywide that could serve as a part of a bus rapid transit network. In addition to the other improvements we looked at, we also looked at bus schedule reliability and passenger travel times as well as part of the evaluation of which corridors could serve as a potential BRT network. And then finally, we looked at ways to identify the quality of streetscape improvements, if you will. And so the study not only looked at bus operational improvements and bus rapid transit potential, it also looked at ways that we could improve streetscape improvement and thereby also improve street life and generate potentially the groundwork for generating additional economic development. Next slide. And so just a brief primer, if you will, of the key attributes of bus rapid transit. Basically, fundamentally, bus rapid transit attempts to sort of steal some of the pages of any major capital improvement, regardless of mode, bus or rail. And it's to improve the quality of the transit service as well as speed travel times and attract more riders in a given corridor. And so these are some of the key attributes of bus rapid transit. Bus rapid transit should be viewed as a system of a variety of elements that must work together to improve the travel times and increase the transit service quality. These attributes include increased frequencies, transit signal priority given to buses at intersections to help speed the corridor travel times, less frequent stops, much like a rail system, branded buses to differentiate this kind of service from conventional, traditional, local transit bus service. Level boarding and alighting, again, to emulate rail. High capacity buses typically are part of any bus rapid transit service as well. Simple route alignment and off-board fare collection is often part of a bus rapid transit service. It's really considered part of an ideal bus rapid transit service, but there are many around the country that don't have off-board fare collection with ticket vending machines like light rail. And then, of course, dedicated bus lanes where they strategically can be placed. The FTA requires for fixed guideway bus rapid transit a minimum of 50% of that corridor be in its own dedicated lanes at peak. However, there's another definition that's also eligible for federal funding called corridor-based bus rapid transit, where it's not required to have a minimum of that 50% of the corridor in dedicated lanes. Next slide, please. So as I said, the objectives of this study were also to look at attracting new riders, much as any bus rapid transit system does, improve service quality and effectiveness, as well as provide more capacity and throughput, provide an identity and quality image, encourage a shift from automobile use to public transit. Throughout the country, the average modal shift is about 10% from auto use to transit, and improve air quality is generated from that those modal split kinds of effects, and then finally to enhance accessibility for all types of riders. That's generally speaking what bus rapid transit does and the objectives of bus rapid transit. Next slide, please. These are the types of bus rapid transit in Los Angeles County, of course. In the upper left of that screen is the Metro Rapid service, what's also called arterial BRT service in other parts of the country, or sometimes called Rapid Bus in California. It's basically a branded service with all of the service elements that or most of the service elements that were described earlier. It tends to be less than 50% of the corridor, and so would be defined as corridor-based BRT in the new FTA parlance. In your lower left screen is the Silver Line, which is a freeway-based BRT, which is emerging and increasing in popularity, and it's one of the alignments that we studied for the corridor that's under discussion tonight. Freeway-based was one of the alignments that was discussed in the Pasadena to North Hollywood corridor. And then finally, to the right of the screen is the Orange Line, which is a dedicated BRT in dedicated lanes throughout the entire length of the corridor, and it represents the sort of the premium end of bus rapid transit service throughout the country. Bus rapid transit service on this corridor, for example, is still the most effective bus rapid transit anywhere in the country, carrying far more than 20,000 riders per weekday. Next slide, please. So our overall approach on this particular study was to advance, again, the goal of a countywide network that served to integrate not only the rapid transit service, the rail-based rapid transit service, and the existing BRT service in the county, but also to serve as a way to serve perhaps underserved corridors as well. And so we conducted this study in collaboration with a variety of stakeholders, including the City of Glendale, the LADOT, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works, as well as the Bus Riders Union was also part of the stakeholders, and a number of stakeholders from various cities around the country, or around the county as well, was part of the study. Using basically evaluation and implementation criteria that are pretty well grounded in the industry literature, we started looking at more than 100 corridors throughout the county to evaluate potential for BRT improvements. And we also wanted to look at a balanced BRT network throughout the county as well. So as the last bullet point indicates, we began with more than 100 corridors in the county. Next slide, please. We used a variety of screening criteria, including existing ridership, potential ridership as measured by some socioeconomic factors that could lead to potential ridership increases, as well as regional balance. We wanted to be mindful of the balance of service improvements throughout the county. It wasn't just confined to one part of the county or another. And then we also looked at political support, what kinds of support each jurisdiction could bring to supporting improved BRT service in that particular jurisdiction. We started out with 100 corridors. We had two sets of screening. The same rough screening criteria were used in both sets, but we refined the screening criteria to be more objective and scientific in the second screening level, and we got down to 14 corridors that then were field reviews of those corridors for street geometries, for a variety of things that you could see only by actually visiting the corridor could be observed for feasibility and implementation, the ability to implement the corridor. Following that field review, we then conducted a cost and benefit analysis, which compared the cost of BRT improvements as well as some of the monetized savings from BRT that could be derived. And those would include things like improved ridership, as well as any efficiencies that could be gained in the corridor, operational efficiencies, that is to say. It wasn't a classic benefit cost analysis that's required, for example, in the federal Tiger program, which has a much broader sense of socioeconomic criteria. It was confined primarily to the kinds of operational benefits that could be derived from a BRT improvement in that particular corridor. And then we selected the strongest candidates from each of the service areas throughout the county, and we arrived at, next slide please, a list of 9 corridors. And these are in more or less the order of how they came out in the rough cost and benefits comparisons, as well as roughly in terms of political support. And it's also how much political support and what could be implemented first in terms of what were the priorities for studying the corridors for further study in the future. And so as you can see at the top, Vermont was listed as one of the primary corridors that needed to be studied, but number 2 was the Pasadena to North Hollywood corridor, based again not only on the potential costs and benefits, but primarily on the level of support, the political support, and it being a very high priority, not only for Metro board members, but for the cities that were in the study area, is one of the reasons why that was advanced to one of the first studies that we recommended be conducted. Next slide, please. And so that the map represents how that 9-corridor countywide network would work, integrated with the rapid transit system that currently exists or is being built out as we speak. We looked at potential ways that it could be funded, but really it's the next step needs to be, some corridor studies for each of these corridors, and we recommended a series of steps that how those corridors should be scheduled in the future. Next slide, please. And so we'll request funding in fiscal 15 for the technical analysis and the corridor level studies that need to be done on the North Hollywood to Pasadena corridor and the Vermont corridor would be the first set of studies that would be requested. And then, as you can see in that second bullet, you have subsequent phases of studies, again based on the recommendations of the 9 corridors recommended to be carried forward for further study. And finally, new rapid service could be implemented at any one of these corridors without existing rapid service, while studying to study bus lanes and other funding becomes available. It's really dependent on the available funding. Currently, this corridor, for example, is still a strategic unfunded corridor in the long-range plan. Any kind of forward analysis, whether it's the corridor study and then subsequent to the corridor study, funding recommendations beyond that are really based on the local funding as well. Next slide, please. And that's it. That concludes my initial presentation. I would be happy to entertain any questions that the Commission might have.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you very much for your report. Could you please elaborate on the funding again? It was not clear to me. Given the past bond issue that passed,
yeah.
Where does this potential project sit relative to that? I think I heard you say there is no funding for this.
Right. There's no funding. We initially looked at potential funding sources, but because a board action needs to take place, Metro board action on this, as well as additional corridor studies that would really get into costs and funding and a financial plan per se. We stopped at the point of just looking at high-level funding ideas.
My question isn't necessarily for funding for design, which I know would have to happen, but I'm talking about funding for implementation.
Funding for
implementation of the...
Yes, so there's a request to be in the fiscal 15 budget, Metro budget, for additional planning studies. Those fiscal 15 planning studies would include the Vermont corridor and the Pasadena North Hollywood corridor.
Again, thank you for your presentation. This is very informational. In terms of these corridors, why this corridor was number 2? What was the highlights that made it number 2?
So I think that the primary reason that differentiated among all of the corridors was the level of support in the 3 cities primarily that primarily exist on the corridor. I think it's safe to say that among all of the corridors that we looked at, this ranks at the very top in terms of the level of interest and political support that was attracted to that corridor. And so it was one of the reasons why it was advanced. I should also add that initially we looked at a number of San Fernando Valley area and San Gabriel Valley area corridors. Some of those corridors are being studied in other studies by Metro, and for the purposes of our study, for example, the East San Fernando Valley corridor along Van Nuys, I was taken out of our study because it's already being studied. These were the remaining corridors that were studied
This
countywide.
little tiny map that we
You want to
have.
add to that, Martha?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a little bit more, and then I think you kind of touched upon it. There was quite a few corridors in the San Fernando Valley, Tri-Cities area that we could have considered, but a lot of them, there were quite a few that were being studied, as Cliff said, under another study. So there was no sense studying them further because we would be, they would be duplicated. So some of those heavy hitting corridors were kind of being done already. So what we were left with studying in that area, this came up kind of high as one of the high. And also too, because we are trying to look at regional balance in this study, and kind of spreading them out in each of the general service areas, and also because this corridor has had so much interest over the years and political support to study this corridor, and it's been identified. It was actually a corridor that's been identified in many studies as being a missing link, regional link or regional connection in the existing transit system as it exists today. So that's another reason why this corridor kind of ranked high. And then if I could just clarify on the funding, because you were talking about funding for implementation. We would like to do a further detailed corridor technical study. We can fund the study, and that's what Cliff is referring to. We're requesting funding for that in our FY15 budget. The problem is that when it comes to implementation, this corridor, none of these corridors are in our long-range plan or in the funded plan of the long-range plan. So that would have to change if, when we update our next long-range plan, if there was a lot of support to get some of these corridors into the funded plan. But that's not, staff's decision to do that. That would be our board of directors' decision to do that and include some of these in the next update of the long-range plan. In terms of implementation, because we know that funding is so scarce, we do want to look at, get these studies tightened up and the alignment refined, and so that we could at least at a minimum propose going out for some federal grant money for implementation, and we would try to identify sources of any potential federal grant that might help us with implementation.
We should also add that this particular corridor was unique in the sense that we looked at 3 alignments for this particular corridor. we looked at a freeway-based alignment, we looked at an arterial alignment, and then we kind of looked at a hybrid freeway-based alignment that traverses not only the 134, but then also serves Burbank Airport on the I-5, and then returns to one of the North Hollywood Metro and Orange and Red Line. So we looked at a number of variations for this particular corridor, and it happened to be, I think it was the only corridor that we did that because of the level of interest and the number of studies that have been undertaken over the past decades.
If I may, I'm sorry, please go ahead. So on the funding again, thank you for your further response. Am I correct in saying that in the last bond issue that was successfully passed, that BRT was not a line item in that bond issue? Is that what I'm hearing for countywide?
Are you talking about a bond issue,
The bond
or
issue
the Measure R, or the sales tax
No,
initiative?
the Measure R.
Bond
Okay,
issue
the
for
sales,
Measure R.
okay,
Yeah.
sales tax.
What I'm asking is, when that was put before the voters in the county by Metro, did that include BRT?
It included one sort of BRT corridor, the Van Nuys corridor, and that's still undetermined whether it will be BRT or light rail, because they're still working through that and going into an environmental. So there was funding put in that for that project, the Van Nuys corridor out in the San Fernando Valley. These, no. And some of these requests have come through, and they have come through for this Pasadena to North Hollywood corridor has come through many times from the COG, as when they've submitted things they would like to see included in the long-range plan. This is corridor that's included. Unfortunately, again, as I mentioned, it's stayed in the unfunded portion of the long-range plan. So there has been no money carved out for this corridor.
That's right, yeah. I think the Metro R did include the Canoga extension of the Orange Line as well, but that was a very early on project within the Measure R program, but that was no future long-range BRT was funded.
Well, it's very good news to see where this fund is on your list, or on the list, I should say, and it would be wonderful to see how we can get it into a design mode and then obviously implemented. When you mentioned earlier that you studied 3 different methods of doing this in an east-west, I think you mentioned the freeway route. You're not in any position right now to say that there is a specific route or a specific corridor that's going to be used. Is that correct? That would come in a design phase? Is that what I understand? This is very, very early in the process?
Yeah, it was. We looked at preliminary conceptual alignments, and one of them sort of follows some of the bus rapid transit lines. That's an arterial configuration beginning in Pasadena and to Glendale and then up to Burbank and terminating in North Hollywood. But generally speaking, follow some of the Metro Rapid service alignments, existing Metro Rapid service alignments, as much as possible. That was the arterial alignment chosen. The other, and it was partly because then we could estimate costs and benefits more readily because the data existed. We did not do, for example, a ridership calculation based on the travel demand model in this study. Was beyond the scope of this study. So we used other means to evaluate costs and benefits and comparing studies, comparing corridors.
Because of the success of the Orange Line, and I think you kind of labeled it as a premium type of BRT, is that a possibility in this east-west, or is it because the Orange Line already had a rail they could have used, but they turned it into what has turned out to be a very, very successful transportation mechanism in the county? Is that possible in this line?
We did look at the Chandler Boulevard alignment that's basically the abandoned, disused railway right-of-way, but it's been turned into a bike path. And the level of political support for that bike path, we determined that it was probably not feasible to use that bike path because of the political support for the bike path to really go that way. You want to add to that, Martha?
Well, even at that, it still wouldn't go to Pasadena all the way, certainly.
Right. It really
I think the Orange Line is a really unique situation. I mean, we really were lucky in that we had purchased that railroad right away long ago, and it was much easier to do. We don't have that kind of railroad right away to do another Orange Line type service. So what we're trying to do as much as possible is to use the existing infrastructure out there and try to get dedicated right away along as much as we can. But there'll probably be mostly curbs, not another Orange Line, but a Metro Rapid type service that runs on Ontario lanes and then just carve out the curb lanes for buses only during at least the peak periods of time. And I think that's, for the most part, going to be, the best that we can do for a while. And so unfortunately, the Orange Line, it was just a perfect scenario for that.
And that's sort of when you look at throughout the country, that's sort of the 50th percentile BRT improvements are strategically placed, dedicated lanes at peak for buses or business access in some cases. And then operating in mixed traffic with transit signal priority. That's a pretty typical configuration.
And we're actually doing that on Wilshire Boulevard, which is the heaviest corridor in the county. For us, it's the heaviest bus line, certainly. We have a Wilshire BRT project that we actually got a federal very small starts grant fund, and that's supposed to be done probably be early 2015 or so, where we're actually going to have almost 8 miles of dedicated peak period bus lanes along that corridor. So we would want to do something similar along those lines.
Madam Chair, it has to be dedicated bus lane. We can't run them in traffic. It honestly doesn't make any sense. What's your position on the combination bus lane bike lanes? We have them on Cesar Chavez Sunset right now. We're running them by Dodger Stadium, and we have them at several locations. What's your position on that, or your opinion?
In terms of the Wilshire bus lane project that we're working on, we do have to allow the bicycles into the bus lanes. That is the city policy, so we have to abide by that. Internally at Metro, there is some concern about mixing bicyclists with buses, especially on corridors where you have a lot of bus traffic. So it's a little bit of a concern for us. In order to do that, we need to be able to at least have a pretty wide curb lane, for it to accommodate a joint use. But and we're really not going to have that wide a curb lane, maybe 11 feet, 12 feet curb lane on Wilshire. But again, by policy, City of LA policy, we have to allow the bikes in there. So definitely a concern for us because safety is number one for us. So we need to find a way as we move forward and do some of these dedicated bus lanes that we find a way to do them so that we can accommodate everything and in a safe manner.
Correct. And the reason I say it needs to be a dedicated lane, if it's not, honestly, if you do the math and if you add up the finances on it, a 5 to 10% increase in travel time, it's not going to justify the billions of dollars if you're to compare it to light rail. So it's a good route. I mean, definitely one of the better options. Hopefully, it'll have a dedicated lane.
Thank you very much for coming, for spending your Monday evening with us. I think this is a conversation that's long overdue. I've used all of the BRT examples that you have in your presentation. I tried to use the 794 this morning, but because I had my bicycle and 2 of the bike racks were already taken, I had to wait for the second one. So to speak to the bike bus issue, I think one of the things that Metro has to deal with is figuring out how to have a 3 bike rack system on your Metro buses, or talking about how to get bicycles in the bus. I know it's been a big concern on the Orange Line, where students, say for example at Cal State Northridge, have to wait 2 or 3 buses to get their bicycles on the bus. I was just looking at the Orange Line ridership for February of this year, 730,000 boardings just for that month. So I think of the congestion relief that we would see as a city if we had this kind of corridor going through our city and into North Hollywood and Pasadena. So thank you very much for taking the time to work on this. You mentioned the report on cost-benefit analysis and the 3 alignments that are being considered. Can that report be shared with us, or can you mention to me where it is so I can find it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The final report has been compiled. One of the chapters of that final report is the benefit and cost analysis.
Okay. If I can get a hold of that, that'd be great.
Sure. Absolutely.
And then lastly, I know you mentioned that you were going to be going to the board in the future to request for funding for a budget. Is there any way that this board can help with that process potentially and throw our support behind it?
We actually went to the board in February, and we did a receive and file, and we did tell the board that we went through this phasing that we proposed and what the corridors were. And we did tell the board in terms of the same thing we're telling you today in terms of next steps, that we're going to apply for the funding to do these studies and a couple of additional staff to help do those. So that's kind of where we are right now. We, of course, have to go through the budget process. Usually, our new fiscal year starts July 1. So if everything goes well and we get that approved in the budget, that would be great. I think also, too, in terms of support, our board chair actually sent a letter out to all of the COGs and out to all of the city mayors, I believe, requesting a list of projects or type of projects they would like to see if should we go out for another initiative, a sales tax initiative. So that's probably where your support could come in as well. Those suggestions and projects you want to see need to certainly come from you and let your voices be heard to the Metro Board.
Right, and definitely those. In some of those instances, that's not communicated to the commission. So if we can somehow help you directly, please let us know.
Okay. Thank you.
One more question. Does this route that's highlighted, does it require any acquisition of land? Or is it going, or it's going to be built, this road is basically going to be attached to certain roads or city property or county properties?
Right now, this study was actually kind of a high-level study, so it just kind of went through a process to identify corridors. Now, when we get down to the nitty-gritty and the real technical corridor studies, we probably at that time, we're not looking at taking land acquisitions, but at that time, once we go out with the cities and the different city engineers, it may be that they can identify, for instance, the Wilshire BRT project again. There are some areas, not very much, but there are some small segments where we're actually narrowing the sidewalk a bit on both sides and widening the street to add additional capacity along that segment. Again, we're not doing much of it, and we also had to use get a permit from the VA property in West LA for a small use of some sidewalk use. So there may be, as we work through the details of how this could possibly work, but right now, we're not looking to do that if we don't need to.
I wish this had a more close-up look of this route and sort of figure out where the stops are and what streets going through, for us to be able to better visualize what's the future path's going to be of this bus route. It would be a possible. Is there do you have anything that's more zoomed in or more close up?
Of the routes?
Of the route of this black and
we can
red.
kind of send you some maybe individual maps of again, keep in mind, the exact alignment's going to be refined further as we go through the quarters. We have some general ideas of what each alternative might look like. If I may, maybe I can send those to Catherine and maybe Ingle, and she can see that you receive them.
Okay,
Very good.
thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation. Very informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item, Anush.
Item 6 is public hearing. At 6A is a report regarding application for the request to modify existing preferential parking restrictions. At 6A1 is a resolution for the modification to the existing preferential parking restrictions on the 300 block of West Lexington Drive between Columbus Avenue and Central Avenue.
Okay, I'm officially opening the public hearing. I have quite a few cards on this. Thank you for your patience, and we will be taking the time to hear what each of you have to say. Just because we have so many, if you're not required to use up all of your time, just to let you know. But let me let you know who I'm going to call up first. Anthony Shin, followed by Maria Shin, and then Lily Furman.
Madam Chair, can we get the presentation from staff first? Follow up with the questioning, is that possible?
Rubik, is that better to do? Mr. Shin, would you please wait? We're going to listen first to the presentation by staff, and then we will take your questions.
Just want to make sure we didn't miss anything.
Rubik?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, the item before you, as mentioned, is an application by the residents of the 300 block of West Lexington between Central and Columbus, who in their petition have requested modification to an existing preferential parking on that block. And as such, staff has conducted a study, and Tad Dombrowski, our parking manager, will walk you through the process and the findings, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments from the public.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chairperson Kubian. What we have was preferential parking that was established 30 years ago, and obviously there's been some changes since then. About a year ago, the residents brought forward a request for a petition, and at that time, all we know is the parking is impacted. And they went out, got the signatures to bring the petition before you for consideration, and in that process, once they submitted the required signatures, staff went out and verified a number of different things. We went out and looked at the occupancies on several different days, several different times, to try and isolate where the parking problem was coming from. What we found is this is not a unique situation. There's a lot of different impacts that are all tying together and causing some of the parking impacts in this area, in this neighborhood. Generally speaking, this street has more multifamily homes than it does single-family homes, which always adds an impact to it. We also have the daytime versus the evening use. And what we're seeing is during the daytime use that the parking occupancy was about 76%, which would, had there not been preferential parking that was already on this street, would barely qualify. There's not a severely impacted problem, and we've brought you in the past, staff has brought you plenty of petitions that are 85, 90, 95% occupied when it comes in, and obviously those areas, when you see that on an average, they're impacted all the time. This area during the daytime is not as impacted. In the evening, that percentage bumped up to about 82%. And again, that it's taking the whole street as a consideration, so certain portions of the street may be impacted more than others. What we also looked at was in 2008, the council made changes to the parking meter program and extended the meter hours till 10 p.m. in the downtown area. What that did to a lot of the businesses that were in that area was push them over to the side streets. And staff really does believe that that's caused a lot of the problem in the evening times and why you get the bump up in occupancy from the evening, in addition to everybody getting home And some of the nightlife in the area, even the businesses on Central, do have people that are coming in, whether it's visitors or employees, and using the street. So based on all of this together, what staff took into account everything, and the occupancies are not at such a high peak that permit parking only is something that we would recommend. We did do that up at the college before, and one of the complaints that we get from the residents themselves is actually that now for every person, I have to give them a guest permit. I have to have them come in and take a chance of getting a parking ticket, just coming into my front door to get a guest permit and then give it back out. So there's a lot of uses in restricting the parking, where if you have 2-hour or 1-hour parking that goes further, it would solve a lot of these issues. Right now, anyone who's coming in at 4 p.m. can effectively stay all through the night without any parking restriction at all. So you have some long-term employees, visitors, or residents, a combination of any of that, who are coming and staying much longer term, where it could be used for some short-term visitors, and the long-term people would go to some of the surrounding streets to find parking. So as a result, we recommended changing it and extending the hours of the existing preferential through 10 p.m. and to be consistent with the rest of the downtown meter program that was approved, going from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and having the 2-hour limit that would allow people to come in, a lot of the residents to come in, whether it's the gardener who comes or someone else, and not have to worry about the restriction. But at the same time, it would push just enough people to other areas and hopefully ease some of the parking burdens that the residents are experiencing.
All right. I would like to hear from the public on this. Mr. Anthony Shin.
Hello, my name is Anthony Shin. I live at 324 West Lexington Drive. I'm here tonight to say something about the parking problem we have on our block. The main problem is Phoenicia Restaurant doesn't have enough parking spaces for its customers. And all these customers, they all park on our block. People that come home after work, they couldn't find any space to park their cars in. And that's the main thing. The restaurant expanded, and I don't think the restaurant has enough parking spaces for its customers. The only problem we have really mainly are the customers parking on our block. That's it. And I was thinking, to solve this problem, we are just requesting for the city to allow us to just have the parking for the residents, their special parking permit. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shin. Maria Shin, followed by Lily Furman.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity of talking to all of you. I am here. My name is Maria Shin. I live at 324 West Lexington Drive, Glendale. And I am here because I'm requesting you to do something about, to work on the solution of this parking issue that currently exists on the 300 block of Lexington. And there was no problem before the restaurant opened, but currently we are having a lot of problems getting parking space. The customers take the space where we should belong to us, or at least have that space available to the residents who reside on that street, on the 300 block of Lexington, bordering Central and Columbus. And I am requesting that the residents, that the parking be limited only to only by permit for the residents who reside on that street. And that's it, and I hope that you do understand the predicament and the problems that we face on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shin. Lily Furman, followed by Vahag Simonian. Is it Vahag? Yes. Is Lily Furman? Okay. Then Vahag Simonian, followed by Hermine Kachoyan.
Good evening, everybody. I'm not a good speech, and I'm not a revolutionary, and I'm from Soviet Union. But the thing is...
Excuse me. Can you state your address for the record?
Yes, my address is 320 West Lexington. And I live like more than 10 years in this address. I have no problem. I don't want to talk about any business, anything bother us, because there is too many businesses. Next building is high building, a lot of pension coming there, handicaps. They have also right to park in the street. And they have I don't want to say we have some privilege, but our street technically becoming like historical, 66 highway street or something, comparing with that. Because a lot of time you can see high speed, big cars, anything happen. But I don't want to blame any organization. For us, for me personally, we need a parking. Who parked there? Whose car is this? Is a customer or patient or relative, somebody's? That's not my business. But technically, to me, this street, comparing with the South Street and North Street next to the Lexington, is totally different. There is no high transportation, no high traffic, but in our street, always it's happened. The reason is why, I don't know. I don't want to explain because my opinion doesn't make any changes in this situation. But only I want to ask, this is supposed to be something. Because a lot of time I called the police, this was happened too many times. There's some people blocking our driveways, parking. Thanks to other organization, they put the red light because we have some problems also. There's some helps already. But my opinion, that will be more helpful for our neighborhood to make permanent parking. That just I'm asking you, just try to understand. Maybe that's gonna bother some other organization, but we can find out also on what telling about the restaurant. The restaurant is like ours. He is also living in that address. He has the same right like we have it. So we can share, we can organize. I think there can be some kind of solution. There can be some permit also given to the residents or customers, so they can put as a customer to be customer. So that's in that case, I think they will be more respectful to the other neighborhood. Because a lot of times we see trash, we see a lot of things. I don't want to talk about it. A lot of some kind of things going around. I have cameras. I have some that's just personal. I don't do that something. But if you need it, I can provide it. But just I'm asking you, just fix this problem friendly. Don't put any restaurant name, don't put any medical organization name, but we can share this. We have to sell. Because we are residents, we working, coming home. You know, you have a home, you're proud. You come in home, you have no parking, you get mad. See, and in the driveway, we can't park 2-3 cars because we have to take one to get another one. So I think it's a good issue. You can help us. That's you're right. And we have the same right like others have it. But we are there more time. We are not changing. We are stable. So we have to have a space. Thank you very much, and sorry for my accent.
It's okay. Thank you, Mr. Simonian. Hermine Kachoyan, followed by Sarine Aivazi.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Hermina Kachoyan, and I live at 328 West Lexington Drive in Glendale. The reason I'm here is to present the fact that 300 block of West Lexington has severe parking problems. We need to keep non-resident parkers from parking at our street. Even though I pay for my parking right now, but when I come home, there's no parking available. People from local businesses and restaurants are coming and creating parking congestion and other problems. Drunk people are coming out of restaurants, arguing, cursing, smoking, marijuana, car alarms are going off, burning tires, going in and out of our driveways, double parking, creating huge traffic, and disturbing the tenants as well. After all these problematic occurrences, at the end, they leave behind litter, cigarette butts, soda cans, used napkins, vomit, condoms, urine, and etc. We don't feel safe, and I won't be surprised if someone gets hurt one day. Over 90% of residents have petitioned and agreed for permanent parking at 300 block of West Lexington. Just like the one on Central and Maple, the one on Metropole Restaurant, it's permitted parking, and I don't see why we cannot have the same permitted parking as well. This is long overdue. Very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kachoyan. Sarine Ivazi, followed by Lisa Medina.
Hello, my name is Sarina Ivazi, and I currently reside at 328 West Lexington Drive. I want to thank all of you for allowing us the opportunity to speak tonight, and we're hoping that together we can work to come up with a solution and that you'd keep an open mind. I've been residing there for quite a while now, a few years, and the reason, and we're bringing this up is it's becoming, the street parking is becoming more congested. And as someone mentioned, it's more than just one problem. So while there's other businesses like the restaurants or the medical building or whatnot, ultimately we want to work together to come up with a solution. A lot of the impacting happens in the evening hours when we're coming back to work. And as Hermina mentioned, we pay for parking to park on the street currently. And we come home and there's no parking. So you spend about half an hour looking for parking around 5-6 p.m. Currently, it's permitted. Currently, it's a 2-hour parking slot from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. But a lot of the people come home around 5-6, so that's where we have the issue. And extending it until 10 is not going to help because a lot of the people will just park, overnight as well. So what our concern is, and what I've noticed personally, again, not picking on any specific places, restaurants, you go home and you go out to eat, it happens a lot after hours, around evening time, nighttime. That's where we see a lot of the congestion coming in. Other businesses is during the day, and as the gentleman mentioned, that's why the level is not so high on the impact level, so about 75% or whatnot. It's extremely impacted at night. I would say it's over 100%. And so, well, we understand there's other businesses and they need to be, conducted and everything. One has to work together. I think there's a lot of residential buildings and we're missing out on the parking because of this. All we're saying is if you make it permitted just like it is for the banquet hall, because the restaurant is also a banquet hall on Metropole, it's on the 300 Maple Street, that's the street parking, it'll help the residents as well as some parking for their organizations for us to come home and be able to paying $25 a month on top of, some of us are rental and whatnot to park and not having parking, it'll help to kind of offset that. We're not disagreeing to pay for parking. We're just saying if we're paying the city for this money to at least be able to accommodate something. And if you make it permitted, whether we have to pay a little bit more or not, at least as residents will be happy to come home and will not have so many issues. On top of that, there's a lot of littering, a lot of drunk people coming out, so it's a lot of disturbance. I personally have made, maybe within the last year and a half, have made about 5 calls, for disturbance, and it is coming from a lot of the restaurants. So we keep bringing up the restaurants. We're not nitpicking. Again, we're on the same block. We just want you to understand that the hours that we come home, most of us work, is those hours that people are going out to eat and they're using the parking space. And it's not just the customers, it's the employees as well. So if we want to be fair, my suggestion would be just like we reside there, maybe the employees can get the permitted parking as well to a certain amount, same amount we get as residents. So again, thank you for hearing us out. That's just our suggestion. It is extremely highly impacted, so anything you could do to help us would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ivazi. Lisa Medina, followed by Luis Alcer.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Lisa Medina. I live on 329 West Lexington. I've been living there for 25 years. The last, I would say about 16 months, parking is really gone really bad. Every time my husband comes home from work, he ends up parking in Myrtle or Milford. There's no parking for him. And his schedule fluctuates. So if he comes home at 10, he might as well forget it. And if he comes home about 3 o'clock, then he'll find a parking. But if he comes home before then, we could never find parking. During the holidays, I don't care what holiday it is, there's no parking during the day or in the evening. I can't even invite my relatives over to have maybe, let's say, a Thanksgiving dinner because there's no parking. And so it's just been getting a little hectic. Sometimes I have to move my car looking for parking to try to save one for my husband so when he gets home. And it's just been getting really hectic. And the litter is really getting bad. I pick up some of the litter because I don't want to see it. You know, they have it all on the sidewalk. They'll have beer bottles. They'll have, you know, just dirty plates, dirty napkins. And I don't want my street to look like that. Because once you let it go, then they think it's okay, and it just gets out of hand. This morning, I went to the doctor early this morning. I see people parking from the medical, all lined up, and they go to 411 and 409. And I see them go in, and I'm waiting. And I really don't, when I first moved in there, I see a lot of parking enforcement, and I don't see that anymore. And so when I'm looking, and then I have this young man parks right in front of my building. He goes across the street over there by heading towards Sears. But he parked his car in Lexington, right in front of where I live, and I'm like, okay. And I see this every day. So it's just getting, I just have a concern. That's why I just wanted to bring my concern up to the committee. Okay. And there is a lot of noise and late at night, and I haven't called the police. I feel that, okay, the police has better things to do than me calling saying the music is past 12 o'clock. But it's getting to that point now. And thank you. I just wanted to say thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a question, if you don't mind. You do have existing preferential parking, 2 hours, 9
Correct.
to 6. But you stated that on holidays, during daytime, you can't find parking.
No.
Is it exempt on holidays?
It's exempt on holidays and Sundays. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And I will have one more concern. When I was reading the letter, it said we're going to open it from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. to consider, you know, who's going to monitor that? Because I don't see parking enforcement there. And it does get bad at night. So that's my concern. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Medina. Luis Alcer, is that correct?
Exactly, right.
Followed by Ruben Kesayan.
Yeah, my name is Luis Alsair. I live in 332 West Lexington Drive. We live 4 people in my house. We are 4 people, and we have 4 cars. Imagine we have 4 cars, and we work we are hard workers. We came to home certain times. Some of them, they leave 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock. How are we going to find the parking? Where? Do I have to knock my next neighbor door, hey, help me, or take spot for me until I come? And the customer, what they do in a restaurant, they calling each other. Believe me, I heard that with myself. Hey, find me a parking. Take 2 spots in your car. So what they do, in the front each house, there's 2 cars or 3 cars. They took 2 spots in 1 car. Then until there's a friend, he's going to come, he's going to move his car, then another car is going to park. Imagine that. It's my own street, next to my house. Why? I don't know. Third, I have brothers, I swear, they came from San Diego. Family. They drove 2 hours and a half from San Diego to here. They came to me to find the parking. There is no parking lot. I went to my neighbors. I bugged him, so he moved his car down to park. He came from San Diego. He couldn't find a parking. And I lost more than 4 or 5 families as a friend to come to visit me, they can. The first thing they're going to ask me, Louis, do you have a parking? Do you have available parking? Or do you have did you find, you're going to find me parking to come to visit you? Is this a lie? I pay my own, I pay my taxes normally, I pay my rent, everything. And the result what? Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al-Said. Ruben Kasayan, followed by Rima Hakopian.
Hi, my name is Ruben, and I'm servicing the restaurant valet parking. And I want to tell you guys, so we have provided 4 or 5 parking spaces, the restaurant parking, park the cars on the parking spaces, which have the 4011 and 409 on North Central, one on Myrtle, and we don't park any cars on the street. If anything, maybe 1 or 2 times happened, I was next to the restaurant, and we try not to park any cars on the street, so the resident can take care of their spaces. That's all I want to say, and try to work with the neighbors too.
Yeah, Mr. Kasayan,
Sorry?
if you can move the microphone
mic.
up, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, I was like saying we're trying to not to park any car. We don't park any car on the street, so the neighbors can park their own cars, and we have enough space for customers, the ones we take care of, as a valet parking. So.
Okay. Let me ask you a
Yes.
quick question. Do you have a place designated,
Yes.
not talking street, designated parking lot that you use?
Yes, we do have like 4 designated spaces, like 411 North Central, 409 North Central, and we have we use Armenian councilors parking lot. And
When you say 4 spaces, you mean 4
parking
locations?
4 locations, yes.
And how many spaces, cars can you fit in those?
We can fit one place like 20, one place 30, one place more than 50, and including the restaurant parking, more than 20. So we have enough space and we don't park on the street. If, like I said, if any parking we put any car, it might 1 or 2 times happens. A few times, where's the restaurant area, not the resident house area.
Okay.
Do
you have a question?
Just a quick inquiry. So it sounds like there's ample parking that you guys use for your valet services. Are you saying that Phoenicia is okay with the permit that's being asked for by the residents? Or would you somehow be impacted by this process moving forward?
Like, I don't understand the question, actually.
It sounds to me that you're saying that the valet services that you provide is adequate enough for the customers for the restaurant. So would there be an issue to this process moving forward for fulfilling the residents' request?
Well, one moment, Mr. Golonian. Would you like to?
No, I'm saying wherever
Yeah.
we do, where we take care.
One moment, Ms. Kran. Yeah.
Yes.
Did you want to jump in?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Botrusov, he's only referring to the restaurant's customers who use the valet service.
Yeah, that's
Not
it.
every customer has to use a valet service. But just to add to that, when the restaurant went through the application in 2011 for the expansion of their existing facilities, they had proposed 2 parking lots at 310 West Lexington and 319 North Central Avenue. And we had estimated that with our standards, they could fit at least 58 vehicles on these 2 parking lots. But when you have a valet operation, you can park them in tandem, and it will increase it significantly, if not double the numbers that they can fit in on those 2 lots.
Okay.
And one real quick. So can you tell me the capacity for those parking lots that you have for valet at the 4 parking spots that you mentioned?
All together?
Yes, or separately?
Maybe 50, more than 100.
More than 100? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kasayan. I have Rima Hagopian, followed by Ara Kalfayan.
Good evening. Thank you for all of your times tonight. So
I'm sorry, could you state your name?
Yes.
And speak into the microphone?
Thank you. Rima Hagopian, 328 West Lexington. I have been living there for 35 years. And for the last couple years, due to the expansion, there's a banquet hall currently on Lexington, corner of Lexington, which holds about over 200 people, guests. And they have venues every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the 2-hour parking is not good enough for us. And the reason for that is because a lot of people, when they go to lunch, it takes less than 2 hours. When they go to dinner, 2 hours, sometimes more. It's not working for me. It's not working for a lot of my neighbors right here. Everybody comes home frustrated, including myself. Please imagine you guys living on a street where you dread going home every night because you know you're going to have to drive around the block, find other streets to park. The gentleman before me said they have 4 parking lots. So the question is, if they have the parking lots and they're filling those parking lots, then they should have no problem in us having permitted parking, correct? But I say they don't have enough parking lot. And not only that, most people, a lot of people, do not want to pay valet. I personally see people walking down the street even further from where I live. And I'm only about 3 houses down from the restaurant. The problem is, respectfully, Ara Kalfayan, who I think is a good guy, probably. But when I addressed him 2 months ago about the noise and disturbance about midnight, he I say what he said, this is downtown Glendale. Lexington is not downtown Glendale to me and to my neighbors. It's our home. We live there, and we want to be comfortable in our homes. We want to come home peacefully and not worry about parking. I don't feel I need to go out every day when I have guests, people that want to come over. I don't feel that I should double park my car outside so I can have my guests a parking spot. One of my guests, believe it or not, a couple of months ago, went and paid valet. I said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "Yep." I don't know. Please help us. And I'm not only saying that it's the restaurant, it's also the medical building. When you go to a doctor's office, typically you don't need more than 2 hours. So guess what? They're parking on our street, going to the medical building and coming back out. I think my neighbors and myself, we've pretty much said a lot here. Please help us to resolve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ara Kalfayan, followed by Arsine Gujelian.
Good evening. If you may let my sister talk first.
Fine.
Arsine Kalfayan.
Arsine Kalfayan.
Good evening. My name is Arsine Kalfayan Gövcelian. I'm Ara Kalfayan's sister, and I personally reside in Glendale, 1636 Hasbeth Lane. Before I address some of the information or the concerns expressed by the previous speakers, I want to start with, the history of Phoenicia Restaurant. As many of you know, or some of you may know, Phoenicia has been in existence since 1978. when Glendale was considered a residential suburb. With the growing population and the influx of foreigners, Glendale evolved to become a metropolitan city with a very active commercial downtown area. Phoenicia Restaurant kept pace with the city and expanded over the last 36 years at this mixed-use location. As you all know, mixed developments, which were once considered a detriment, are now considered to be beneficial. Not only people benefit from mixed-use developments, developers, businesses, and local governments stand to gain from mixed-use developments. However, everything, there are pros and cons to mixed-use developments. The pros include convenience to residents. They can just walk to restaurants and shopping areas. They can save money on fuel. There will be injection of life in neighborhoods. Prominence will increase. Of course, the cons include congestion. Congestion is not avoidable. We're going to have congestion and resultant side effects like limited parking spaces. To address the limited parking spaces, Phoenicia Restaurant has taken several steps, several measures. We have provided valet services, and in addition to the on-site parking lot, there were contracts signed with 3 off-site locations. The question was asked, if you do have adequate parking, why not agree to the extended hours or the paid parking? Well, we believe that this will set a precedence and will adversely affect businesses, existing businesses, and potential new businesses that are willing to come to Glendale downtown area and provide mixed-use services. To address the issue of parking limitations, we used to live on Campbell Street, which is quite a distance away from central downtown location, and we experienced the same frustrations and the same concerns as my predecessors who came up to this podium. We couldn't find parking if we, in addition to the parking spaces provided in our units, we weren't able to park outside. Our guests had to turn around blocks, and I think this is a universal problem that exists in cities that are growing in population.
With poor planning.
With poor planning. I didn't want to insult any planners, but, this is universal. And, having lived in Glendale for many, many years, we have experienced parking problems because of maybe poor planning and also because of illegal practices. some people, they don't use their parking spaces, and they rent out their parking spaces.
Thank you, Ms. Koff. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We went over the time, but I think we understood what you were saying. I appreciate it. If I could call up Mr. Kalfayan to make his remarks.
Farah Kalfayan at 343 North Central Avenue. I'm the owner of Phoenicia. I do share their
Mr. Kalfayan, I'm sorry, can you move it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I share their concern of my neighbors, and I always care about them. I respect them, and I always have done my best to please them. And I always shared my thoughts with the city employees, with the mayor, with the council people, and the planners, with the city engineer, and that's the best, whatever is the best I have done. We have rented several off locations, and I have the location addresses and the plans here, and it shows how many cars they do hold in there. If you'd like me to pass it to you.
Please.
Please, yeah.
Roughly, top of your head, do you know how many total, if you were to add them up?
Around 100, I believe.
Around 100, and those are all 4 locations.
Yes.
And you're looking at 50, 20, 20, and about 15 on property.
We have the Unified Youth School District that holds about over 40, 50. Then we have one across the street at 411 that will hold another 40. We have our own that holds about 30, 25. And then we have the parking lot of the Armenian consulate will hold about 10.
And what's the occupancy of both locations, including the banquet hall and the main restaurant?
It will hold about 400 or 500 guests.
400 to 500 guests.
May I?
Go ahead.
Certainly.
A question also on the response that you gave to the numbers of parking spaces. Is that striped parking spaces, or is that maximum based on valet parking?
No, it's a striped.
So how many do you get on there on valet parking?
We can double.
Thank you.
And our employees are restricted to park on Lexington. There is no way they're allowed to park on Lexington. They are parking at the Unified District School at Myrtle.
Now, obviously, you don't have any control of the people that they choose not to valet park.
Anyone. Yes.
And any business doesn't have control of that.
And you do have to consider that you're in downtown Glendale. It's a business and commercial area.
It is, but you're on if I look at Lexington between Columbus and Central, it's more of a residential than a business. There's a business at one corner, the rest is residential. But I absolutely understand what you're saying. I also am a big believer in finding solutions because it's mixed use. Both have to give to come up with a median that's acceptable to both.
Right.
Now, having said that, have you ever considered there's Lot 6, it's a city lot on Orange, south of Lexington. And it's, how many spaces do we have in Lot 6, approximately?
About 110.
About 110. Now, it's in operation till 10 p.m. at night, right? Walking distance is 5 minutes, 10 minutes to the restaurant?
Sure.
It's definitely less than 5 minutes or so. If we find a solution where that lot remains open later, obviously there's going to be, a bill attached to it because city staff might have to be there. And it will be free parking for some of your patrons that they decide not to pay the $5 or $10 for the valet parking. What do you think of that idea?
I welcome any idea, any solution.
Let me, a couple questions. Rubik, you threw out a couple addresses. Where is that in the scheme? Are those different facilities?
These two addresses, Madam Chair, were submitted with the application for the expansion. There was 310 West Lexington and 319 North Central.
And those are lots, or I'm sorry, can you explain? They're just lots.
They're lots, yeah.
And those are incorporated here?
Yes.
Okay.
They're part of this.
May I ask, have you ever approached the, is it the furniture store, the parking lot on Myrtle? That's adjacent, I guess, to the back of your
Yes, we have a very good relationship with them. When we need to, we can park there. But officially, we have the contracts with what I gave you.
Yeah,
but this is unofficial.
Well, that's a huge parking.
And they do always leave the premises about between 6 and 7 o'clock, and they have given me the key to use that.
Excuse me, can I, if we can just, he's trying to answer some questions and we can't hear with the noise. I'm sorry, so you have approached them? Sir, please give him the respect to speak as he did for you, all of you, please. You have spoken with them, and so there is a...
Yes.
Okay.
At this time, yes. But if it changes, I don't know in the future. But at this time, I have the key to open if they have a small gate we can use it if we need to.
Okay. Well, that's a very big parking lot, Mr. Gawanyan.
Madam Chair, were you thinking of additional valet parking location?
Off the top of my head, I think we're, just to put it out there, Mr. Kalfayan is not required by the city to be providing valet parking. From what I understand, there's no requirement by the city
Yeah, if I may clarify that, at the time when Mr. Kalfayan applied for an expansion of his business, the business, or Mr. Kalfayan, was required to apply for a parking use permit. In essence, what that means is there wasn't sufficient parking available on site for his customers.
Mm-hmm.
So as part of that parking use permit, then he had to make arrangements for additional parking. And as a result of those arrangements, he came up with these lots that could provide valet parking. So his solution to that problem was, I'll provide valet parking, and these are the lots that we'll be utilizing.
And would you be willing, Mr. Kalfayan, to move forward with that, that understanding with that furniture parking lot, which would seem to be empty in the evening hours, if need be?
Why not, if we need to, yes.
If you need to.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
In a nutshell, in order to meet code, he went out there and reserved these lots. Is that correct?
Correct, Commissioner Kurkjian.
Now, do we have copies of these contracts on file at the city that he has?
Yes.
It will be in our community development offices, not in my office.
Okay. So we have no code issues.
We do not have a code issue because, as I mentioned earlier, there is a parking use permit, and with valet parking services that the restaurant provides.
Excuse me.
Do they have any CUPs for
Yes,
this?
there was an application for a CUP that was approved back in 2011, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Since we're talking about numbers, Rubik, do I understand that based on the size of the restaurant and the number of people can go to the venue, the current agreements between the business and the city provide sufficient parking by zoning code or by CUP, by conditional use permit?
Commissioner Gonzalez, it was by CUP.
And those are currently being met. They're not being. It's not gone beyond the CUP.
Correct.
Thank you.
I don't at this time.
Okay, Mr. Kalfayan. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Kalfayan. If we have any more questions, we'll direct them to you. Yeah, we have
You get more speaker cards.
to repeat at this point.
I don't mind it. If they're new speakers, though.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this, I guess this is a repeat. Is this one a new one? Well, John. Speak before. We can go on and have people calling up, getting up to speak, and then pulling another card to, rebut what you may have heard already. If there isn't anyone that has already had the chance to come up and speak, I welcome them to get up and speak, but I think everyone had the chance. Is it Boskan Galstian, I think? He hasn't spoken, has he? Okay, then I think there's a Mr. Boskan Galstian, yes, who hasn't had the chance to speak.
Good evening. My name is Boskan Galstian. I'm 343 West Lexington Drive resident. Can hear you? Okay, sorry. I'm resident 343 West Lexington Drive. We are living same that's house 14 years. We are 4 person. We are able to drive, but we can't drive 4 cars. With keeping 3 cars because problem. I think this problem is coming from restaurants and medical buildings. So we came here not close to closing that restaurant. We came here to get our rights to get parking for us. I think it's a big issue. Please do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galstian. Okay, I think that is all the cards we have. Mr. Viken Hagopian?
Hello, my name is Vigen Hagopian. I live in 328 West Lexington, unit number 3. I'm the one that pick up the signatures, 98% of signatures, okay? I'm involved from day first. If Mr. Ara says he's got 400 capacity of the customers of the restaurant, he should make that valet parking free, okay? He's saying he's got 2-3 different places. He's got a key, he can park the car. Okay, let's do the valet parking free. This way everybody can hand the car to the valet guy and take it to parking to the furniture, back of the furniture. Anyway, they're not allowed to park in the back of the furniture. They used to park it, now they kicked out. They put a gate and nobody can park in that. Okay, only place they park, he's got only 11 parking space on Lexington. And then sometimes he park on 411 parking. I never see taking the car behind the embassy or in any other places. He's got only 2 places. That's all I can say. If he thinks his business is good and he's got plenty of room to park, might as well just make space for everybody free, and we don't have the problem. Anyway, we're not here against restaurant or anybody else. We want our street to be permitted parking only, 24/7. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hagopian. Mr. Zavan Hanessian?
Good evening. My name is Zaven Hanessian, 1850 Samarkand Place in Glendale. I've been in Glendale since 1973. One of the gentlemen, he was saying he has 4 cars. I don't know he lives in apartment or house. If house, you should have a 2-car parking. And he can park in the driveway. And then other apartments, when I was in parking commissioner, okay, we got this issue, overnight parking issue. And then council didn't pass that. Anyway, a few years ago, I tried to rent the one office in Glendale, and they said, you like parking? I said, yeah, of course I need parking. Well, you have to pay $45 per spot. I said, why? You built this building as per code, as per square foot, then you have to provide me 3 parking. I said, I'm a parking commissioner. I can't complain. Couple hours later, broker called me. He said, you have a free parking. You know, those people, apartments, they rent the parking, okay, they charge extra, and then poor guys, they cannot afford to pay extra money for the apartment. Then end up parking outside on the street. If I have a 5 car, okay, where am I going to park? You know? And then every garage, they turn to unit, they turn to warehouse, they turn to bedroom, and they use it. But after that, they complain about the parking. This is my complaint, not complaint, like this is my recommendation. Owner has a parking enough, any house, any apartment. But unfortunately, people, they're charging extra per unit, per car. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanessian. Okay, I think that's the speaker card. Would you like to? Oh, there's one more? Oh, I'm sorry.
I would like to.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Commissioner Ikuyan, commissioners, I wanted to add a couple things real quickly. There were also some comments we received via phone or email from people who couldn't make it tonight. Almost all of them were very similar to what you've heard so far. The parking is impacted. The residents feel that they are in support of a change to try and minimize the impact to the residents. So they were unified in that. The method of getting there and the restriction is where everyone seems to vary as far as what restriction would be best and most appropriate. So I wanted to also touch on a couple other things in response to some of the residents that had concerns or suggestions related to this. One of them was the 24-hour restriction on Maple. We do have on Maple and in a few other areas, Windsor and some other areas throughout the city, we do have a 24/7 restriction. We have implemented these before in the past. They are usually specific isolated incidents where it makes sense. On Maple, it was a 24-hour gym that was operating that was impacting the residents, and it was available 24 hours a day. So the restriction down there was different than the remainder. The challenge we also have is we're focusing on the area that is closer to Central a lot. The further we restrict the parking as far as whether it's 2-hour, 1-hour permit only, the further we restrict that parking and the more hours we restrict that parking on the other end of the street toward Columbus impacts the other residents who may use that parking because they live on Myrtle or Milford or Columbus and surrounding streets. They sometimes may find available parking around the corner, like a lot of the residents here, and we would be pushing them away from Lexington as well. So it's finding the delicate balance that is challenging to meet everyone's needs and to be able to find a solution. I have not come across a point, the valet parking issue, I have not come across a point where I've heard that the valet is full. The valets seem to find the extra capacity when needed. They may not park all the time over across the street at the embassy because that may be their last lot and most inconvenient lot as far as returning cars and the queues and everything else. So it seems to me like the capacity of what's available for the valet isn't the concern. There's plenty of customers who choose not to park with valets. They don't like people touching their car. They don't want to pay for parking. There's a lot of different reasons why they give as far as not using a valet service. So it's really those customers that are, I believe, coming through and parking in the neighborhoods that are where anyone from the businesses would be impacting on the residents. And by having a restriction from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. instead, Currently, the restriction to 6 p.m. ends at basically 4 o'clock. If you park there anytime after 4 p.m., you can park there all night. So anybody who's coming to the restaurant, whether it's for 3 hours, 6 hours, as long as they want, would technically be able to park there. By extending that restriction to 10 p.m., it really allows for any parking, unlimited parking after 8 p.m. And it would allow a window that doesn't currently exist from 4 to 8, where there would be 2-hour parking. Some people who may be coming for businesses would choose to park in other areas because now the parking's restricted, and those spaces would then go to residents. So I think they will be filled, but I think they'll be filled by residents. And then if there are people who come later on, they would be taking XX space if it was available. So, and the last thing, just to touch real quick, one thing I want to mention on the 24-hour restriction, what we found is the pendulum swings both ways. You start with unregulated parking at all, and on the other end is the 24/7. What we found on the few places where we've implemented 24/7 is your parking occupancy drops to the floor. Sometimes you wind up with seeing something at 80, 90, 100% that's suddenly 20%, and you wind up with unutilized parking. So we were trying to find something that would push it in the direction that would favor the residents having as much parking as available as possible. If this solution didn't work, we have no problem reevaluating this and coming back to you in a few months once this has been implemented and making a recommendation to go with that same time restriction. But now let's try 1 hour parking instead of 2 hour and see if we can push some more people away from Lexington where the street seems to be impacted.
Let me ask you a question. What is your knowledge about currently the construction and development being done on Central, a short distance away from this area that we're discussing? What impact have you seen of any workers, and obviously would probably be during the daytime, that's utilizing these streets?
Chairperson Yakubian, we have seen a lot of impacts from the construction on Central. This petition process actually started in about April last year, and we were not able to take it toward the end of 2013 because of the construction that was happening on Central, not just the construction of the private developments, but also Central itself was having construction done on it, and there were a lot of areas not available for parking. So we waited until February to do the car counts, until after the holiday period, and to a time where it's more normal of what the residents would typically see as opposed to during the construction area. I think a lot of the construction from the private developments that are happening in the downtown area now, there may be minimal impacts to Lexington itself. A lot of them are pushing to other streets where they don't even have a 2-hour restriction.
Got it.
But even then, you said during daytime, occupancy rate was at 76% on the whole block.
Correct.
Did you want to jump in? Go ahead, Alex.
Can somebody on staff tell me the hours of operation for the restaurant?
Madam Chair, we can ask the restaurant owner.
Must be use permit.
Mr. Kalfayan, would you mind approaching?
I didn't know that I have co-owners, partners with me. Last night I left between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and I took a ride along the Lexington behind the restaurant, and there was not single parking left on that street at 3 o'clock in the morning.
So can you tell me the hours of operation for your business?
11 o'clock till 12 during the day, during the week. On the weekends, it's 2 o'clock.
11 a.m. to midnight?
Midnight during the week, and till 2 o'clock on Friday and Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking at the breakdown in your analysis of the study, when you say we started off with 76%, that really comes out to we have a total of 58 total available parking spots for that street. So that 76% is really saying that 44 are being used, 44, which leaves 14 spots open during your study during the day. And then looking at the time frame of the evening, the 6 to 10 p.m., it increases, but translated into space usage, that's really only saying 3 or 4 more cars have used up some spots, with 10 or 11 spaces still being free. Does that make sense? And is that the correct way to read?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
I have a quick question. If we were to fulfill the request of the residents, would this cover Sundays, or are Sundays and holidays excluded?
Commissioner Bartosoff, we had left Sundays and holidays excluded in the recommendation, in the staff recommendation. That's very typical in the other referential parking areas where Sundays and holidays are excluded. There are places where, because of a Sunday use, on an individual case by case, we will fold it over and include Sundays as well. But typically, it's something that we leave open and unrestricted.
Okay, so of course this is not a typical situation, and you mentioned some examples of areas where there are restrictions because of instances like this. Can you tell me how those are handled, if those include Sundays or not? Like Maple and Central, for example, and then there was another one that you mentioned.
Yes. Let me understand the question. So other areas that are similar where you have a few businesses that may impact it?
Yeah, you mentioned the 24-hour gym on Maple and Central. Is that parking restriction on that corridor including Sundays or excluding Sundays?
Commissioner Bartosoff, yes, that is including Sundays, as well as on Windsor, which is directly adjacent to the Brand Boulevard of Cars, and that also includes Sunday as well, because when the survey was done and that was being requested, it was definitely impacted on Sundays as well. Upon further analysis of the entire South Brand area and the changes that were brought to council last year, it was determined that Sundays were not impacted as a whole. And the more you tried to push in one area, the more it impacted residents and customers in another area. So the regulation for the South Brand area, south of Colorado, is Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. In the north of Colorado, the meter regulation is really the regulation that seems to be driving a lot of the parking impacts and changes, which is 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., Monday through Saturday.
Madam Chair,
yes.
If I may, just to add to that and to answer your question more directly, it depends. It depends on the nature of the business or businesses that are impacting parking on a given residential street, and how long they operate and how the impact is.
Well, given this restaurant, at least as I understand it, it's open on Saturday, open on Sundays, and I would think that it's not a matter of whether it may be impacting. I'm hearing that it is impacted. Is that correct? I mean, there could be weddings or whatever going on on a Saturday or a Sunday, and it seems like it would be impacted on Saturday or Sunday also. Day and evening, is what I'm hearing. Could we verify that, please?
Commissioner Gonzalez, correct. It could be impacted on Sundays. We have not heard of Sundays as much as very similar tonight. The residents, when they come home from work, need a place to park. The nighttime was really the main focus of the complaint. If Sundays is a complaint, if we could look at Sundays specifically, we actually did most of our surveys through the week and did not include the weekend, because again, typically the complaints we were getting was when we're coming home from work during the weekdays, we can't find a place to park. So as a general whole, Sundays were not looked at specifically with this use. A lot of times also on Saturdays and Sundays, the residents are there. They've come home from work, they've gotten there from Friday night, and a lot of times they will stay through sometime on the weekend. They may run errands, they may go out and come and go, but a lot of the businesses aren't as impacted, don't bring as many employees in on the weekends as they do on the weekdays. So there is a mix, and it very much depends on every street and every business that's impacting it.
Please, I'm sorry, I can't allow, we must keep some decorum here. I'm sorry, we can't have interjections like this.
Chairperson Yakubian, before we move into our deliberation, I'd just like to add that the concerns and complaints of restaurant customers parking on this block of Lexington is based on that. It's complaints. When our staff collected the data based on the license plates and we ran them through the police department's database, it only shows residential or resident permits or non-residents. There is no way we can distinguish who those non-residents are who park on 300 block of Lexington or anywhere in the city of Glendale. So the statistic that staff showed me, 50% were non-residents parking on that street. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention for your deliberations.
Go ahead.
Did you also check the percentage of tenants versus property owners or condo owners on that block? What's the percentage of tenants versus owners? Any idea?
Commissioner Kurjian, no, we don't include that as part of the study. The study strictly focuses on the amount of on-street parking there is versus the amount of vehicles parked in that stretch.
How about any violations that property owners might have, such as neighborhood violations or any violations as such, like converted garages and so forth?
Commissioner Kurkjian, that's something that we need to bring up with our neighborhood services inspectors to look into. But this study did not include
neighborhood services.
No.
Very good. Fellow commissioners, if you don't have any questions of the speakers or audience members, I'd like to officially close the public hearing portion of this.
I have one last question, just real quick.
Okay.
There was one inquiry about parking enforcement and the time in which they operate. I've called parking enforcement in the past in the area that I live in, so I'm just curious, what are their hours of operation, and does it exceed 6 o'clock?
Commissioner Botrusov, our parking enforcement staff work until 7:30. However, anyone who can call the police department for violations, and they can enforce parking, any of our police officers. It's not limited to, although they work until 7:30, it's not limited to those hours.
So police act as parking enforcement after 7:30?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll save my comments for later.
I have one more question. Of the business owner?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Mr. Kalfayan, I'm sorry to... This is your exercise for the day. I'm sorry. One more question for you.
Thank you. I didn't do exercise today.
Yeah,
Could you please respond to the question on Saturdays and Sundays during the daytime of your business? What type of venues are happening in your business on Saturdays and Sundays?
During the evening or lunchtime?
I would say from the time you're open, 11 o'clock, through the day and into the evening. If you could please describe a normal weekend operation.
We're open 7 days to the public. We never close. All the hours, it's open for everyone. And we do get certain parties here and there, depending on their size. Does that satisfies your question?
Well, here and there, Saturdays, Sundays, again, what type of venues are happening and about how many times a month as a guideline or per week?
If I can book it every day, I will book it. I mean, that's why I'm in business there.
Sure.
I have spent so much money and I've been so many years working on this. So I can book every day. I'll be happy to book, but I don't succeed yet. Mm-hmm. That's my intention.
Okay, so your intention is to have more functions. Okay.
What else I can do?
Thank you, Mr. Kalfayan. I appreciate it. And I will now officially close the public hearing portion of this and go into deliberations with fellow commissioners. Someone like to begin with their thoughts on this? Adam? Commissioner
We'll go at the
Sahakian?
end.
You'll go at the end? Okay.
Well, it's frustrating. Honestly, it's frustrating. This is the results of poor planning over the years, city issuing permits left and right, construction permits with substandard parking requirements. It's as simple as that. And it's not just the businesses causing this. I have friends on Campbell Street. I don't visit them anymore. The reason I don't visit them, there's no parking. And that's all residential. There's no business around it, okay? But we're faced with a situation here that this commission needs to find a median. We need to find a solution to keep both sides happy. As far as the extreme, I'm not for that, I can tell you that. Because ideally, as a transportation engineer, the ideal condition is to have every space on that block occupied with every resident parking on the street, happy because they have a parking spot, and the available parking occupied by people going to the businesses. That's 100% occupancy and both sides are happy. Can we achieve that? It's hard. Now, I don't think that's the only problem. What I'm also hearing is, and the business has no control over it. And again, I don't think this is just the Phoenicia. It's also the medical center. It's also other businesses in the area. I mean, it's kind of nice enough from Mr. Kalfayan to be here. I don't see the medical center here, and they could be causing the problem. But he chose to be here to answer the questions, and to me, it shows that he's trying to be a good neighbor. But also, the business, unfortunately, creates issues and problems such as drinking. People go out on the streets, they do things that they shouldn't be doing. It happens. It happens. I know it because I've done it when I was a teenager. All right, so it's not a secret. Now, as far as the 24/7, I'm straight out. I mean, I can't support that. But I also think that we need to help the residents. They're in a situation where they need some help from the city, they need some help from the commissioners. I don't know what the hours should be. If I'm willing to sit down and brainstorm this more with my fellow commissioners and staff to come up with a better solution, because I feel that we're put in a situation that we need to make a decision in a short period of time. And I'm not prepared to do that right now. Maybe it's only 1 hour parking. Maybe the 2 hours is too long because some of the businesses, you go to some of the businesses for less than 2 hours. Now, as far as the 10 p.m., I'm more leaning towards midnight maybe because then 10 p.m. is the cutoff. So if you do 10 p.m., now 8 p.m. is the cutoff. Well, a lot of people go out partying at 9 p.m., not 8 p.m. If we can come up with a situation where the residents can get home, park their vehicles, and then what's left is available to the businesses, maybe that's a solution we need to look at, and we can adjust the hours accordingly. That's my 2 cents right now, and I'll speak again at the end.
Okay.
But I want to hear my fellow commissioners.
Okay, excellent.
I'll take a stab at it. So this is certainly a hot button issue, and this is my first hot button issue since I came on the commission, and I've never seen so many people in the crowd. So thank you for coming and spending your time with us. I do think that we do need to find some kind of balance. We need business. We need residents here that are happy, that want to stay here. I live in a neighborhood that is affected by businesses that run 24/7. I live right off of Brand, where there's the 24-hour fitness, and there are people constantly coming in and out of the gym and refuse to park in the city parking lots and come and park in front of my building. So I definitely understand the frustration. Likewise, I enjoy Phoenicia. I go there. I'm able to walk there and not affect anybody, so nobody can be upset with me for parking in their neighborhood. And I do think that there were comments about mixed use and parking, and as somebody who studied urban planning, I understand the importance of mixed use, and I welcome it to this community. I think it's long overdue. And if you look at all areas where there is mixed use or where mixed use is coming in, we realize that parking is not free. And it's not free for anybody, whether it's businesses, the customers that come to those businesses, for the residents. None of it's free, and it's never going to be free. The cost of parking is constantly going to go up because of the population rise. I think it's extremely frustrating for residents who have to pay for the parking with the current configuration and still have frustrations about not finding adequate parking. I think that's not right. If they're not going to find parking, maybe they shouldn't have to pay for these permits. I think that Phoenicia has a lot of opportunities to expand their parking. It's my understanding, with what Mr. Kalfayan said verbally, that he has a commitment with the furniture shop. There's ample parking there. And if that's the case, I would suggest that maybe they consider providing that as free parking for their customers, have adequate signage in front of their store, directing people to that parking lot and allowing them to use that for free, and then continue to use the valet parking as you do. But I think that the current recommendation from staff, I think, is not enough. Again, I go back and forth about whether 2 hours is too long, but I certainly think that with the situation that we have on this particular street, that 10 p.m. is not enough. I think it should be extended to midnight, and it should include Sunday. If we had it until 10 o'clock, like Mr. Sakian said, a lot of people do come out and are out past 8 o'clock. And if it's until 10, anybody can park after 8 and stay there until the next morning. And I don't think that that'll work for this particular situation. So those are my two suggestions. I understand we can propose alternatives, so I do propose that we include Sunday and that we include limiting parking until 12 o'clock. And for the residents who are frustrated, please use city resources. I call the police all the time, and I call parking enforcement all the time, and sometimes they get frustrated with me because I do call regularly. But for those of you who are hesitant, who don't use those services, if you see things on your street that are unwelcoming, that make you feel uncomfortable, that don't make you feel safe coming home, call those people and make sure that those problems are addressed appropriately. Thank you.
I totally concur with the two comments, or the comments from the two commissioners relative to the hours, relative to the Sunday issue. I do feel that it would be good if we had a bit of time to resolve this, because mixed use is an issue that has to be dealt with, and we have existing conditions as opposed to all new development happening. But given what the residents have commented on this evening and the work that has been communicated from the restaurant owner, I think the recommendation that's currently on the table needs a little bit more, some changes that have been suggested by other commissioners. I concur with that in that direction.
Again, thank you all for coming tonight and sharing your frustrations. But my feeling is a little bit different than my fellow commissioners in terms of looking at the picture as a whole. This intersection, centrally in particular in downtown Glendale, is going through transition, in my opinion. And City Council is approving all these condo projects, and whole downtown is in transition period. And this application process had started back in April, and probably this residents on Lexington were frustrated back then. Now there's construction going on. However, commercial businesses are gone, such as Sears and the Shell station over there. It used to be billiards and so forth. They're all gone, and they're going to be residential units just like yours. We have no idea what kind of effect those residential units are going to have on your block. That may very well free up parking on Central, and that will be metered parking. Also, the city, by approving all these apartments, they want to bring in entertainment to downtown. They don't want downtown Glendale to be a ghost town. They don't want vibrant downtown Glendale. I was in Pasadena over the weekend. We left there at midnight. There were cars, full of cars on Colorado Boulevard. That's what the message that our city is sending out. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gulanian. By So for us to restrict, where I don't, and especially for entertainment-related uses, I think we're sending out wrong message for future big-name tenants for the city of Glendale that they may want to come in to do business. What's the solution? We have to further brainstorm, I believe, to come up with a better solution. Maybe we can ask Mr. Kalfayan and his staff to park at the Orange Street parking and to free up the Tuesday afternoon club for free parking for your patrons. We just put a sign up there, say Phoenicia free parking over there, and maybe that's how we can solve for people who don't want to pay for valet and alleviate some of the traffic on Lexington. Reverse of what neighbors want to do by permit parking only, that will have, the pendulum will very well swing the other side. What's probably going to happen conceivably by those neighbors, they're going to put their cars, park their cars over there 24/7 and leave their cars and garages open for their neighbors. So that's going to fill out the whole street. And I think that might, I don't think that's what we're looking for as a city. So we have to come up with a medium in terms of try to satisfy both the neighbors and businesses, but we don't want to send the wrong precedent here, in my view. Just like if there's one street like Maple, 24-hour parking, that's being already, that's precedent is already being imposed upon us right now. And that 24-hour fitness has been there for many years. And I know Jim Pepper, who is the owner of that building, leased it 20-some-odd years ago, and perhaps that lease is coming up for renewal. If the 24-hour fitness is gone, I don't think that's probably going to go as well. And furthermore, our last meeting was reversing permit parking. We reversed permit parking for streets of single families because they don't want to pay the fees. I'm not sure how many percent of you are residents or tenants, but if they're tenants, maybe that's going to impact the rent on those units and might affect property values. So that's also something needs to be looked at. So in terms of 1 hour or 2 hour, I mean, I think we need to discuss a little further and get our chairperson's input on that before we kind of.
I don't know if the residents want to, put this off. I think they want to have some sort of a resolution and kind of get back to their, normal, what is normal for them, their lives there. But I agree with parts of what my commissioners say. Commissioner Kirkjian touched on some important points. Glendale is changing. We've seen this as commissioners with various parts of Glendale kind of morphing and different expectations and needs, a push and pull between businesses and residents. We see it throughout the city. And we see the struggle, and as they said, a fine line needs to, you have to walk the line and create some sort of a balance. In regard to this case, this is an establishment that's gone back, over 35 years. It's not a new kid on the block. It's been there. Yes, it has grown. And you look at it from the residents' point of view, that might be a bad thing. For Glendale as a whole, it might be a very good thing. I don't think that the purpose of this should be to block out any customer. The purpose shouldn't be to block out any customer who wants to park on the street, shouldn't have any street parking. I don't think that should be the purpose, because as one of the speakers said, you guys are neighbors. He has a right to be at that corner. And but we do have to find that balance. I can't dismiss the work that the staff put into this report and their analysis. I can't seem to go away from the numbers that you've put down showing the availability. And that's not to say that I'm dismissing what you say, because goodness knows if you're coming home, you have kids, and you can't find the parking, these numbers don't mean anything to you. But from a point of view of the analysis that the staff has made, we see that on average during the day, you had that 22 non-residents. And as Mr. Golanyan pointed out, we don't know who those 22 non-residents are. Part of it belong to one of the residents on that street who has 4 vehicles. I'm sorry that poor gentleman brought that issue up, but that was something I was going to bring up too. Who's to say that, everyone there living there has 1 car, 2 cars? I mean, could be people with more cars there. So we don't know who those 22, of those 22 non-residents, who they are. It's easy to put the finger on the restaurant. It kind of leads me to the next point. As a commissioner and having sat on here and seen the struggles between businesses and residents throughout the city, I'm going to say that Mr. Kalfayan is a really good neighbor as far as a business goes, because I have seen from the commissioner's point of view, the efforts that I see him making to accommodate, to try to help. I mean, I don't think he likes if someone is saying there's people drunk on the streets or they're littering. I don't think he as a neighbor really wants to see that happen. So, with that being said, I do believe Mr. Kalfayan and his efforts to kind of alleviate that problem with all those valet parking locations that he has. I certainly don't believe that he wants to impose on the neighbors and be an imposition. I don't think he wants to be here tonight. I don't think any of you want to be here tonight. I don't want to piecemeal Glendale's parking. I don't want to have my name associated with putting stuff down and then watching the domino effect happen in this kind of pristine area of Glendale. This is a new area that hasn't been kind of ravaged like South Brand. And I don't want to see that happen here. So I often turn towards the guidance of city staff who has the insight to see and to have that delicate balance of how to maximize streets. I believe that this can also be revisited. Unless everybody wants to put it on hold until we have a big study done on this district, my personal position is, or if we want to have like a district of this area, have it analyzed, have research done, which I don't think the residents want to do, I am inclined to go with city staff recommendation for now. And if at a later point there seems to be a problem or it's not working, I'm more than happy and welcome to revisit this issue again. But as I stand today, I would like to see some step forward being made for these residents, and for that reason, I am for staff's recommendation.
Chairperson Yakubian, members of the Commission, just to reiterate, staff's recommendation is, and for the sake of consistency
and I'm sorry, I
uniformity,
should have pointed that out.
Yes.
To the 10 p.m. I think it is. Let me read the exact language. Alternative 1, I believe. Alternative number 1 in your report.
Staff recommends modifying the parking restriction hours from 2 hours, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to 2 hours, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's staff's recommendation.
Right. Thank you. Does anyone have any, do you want to chime in on it?
I would like to explore the orange lot. I honestly do. I want to explore a shuttling operation, maybe with the valet service. If you don't want to walk the 5 minutes, you can get on a van. And not only for this business. Like Ara said, the whole area is developing. I honestly see that orange lot being occupied 100% in 10 years by residents, by businesses in the area. And we need to start thinking outside of the box. What we have is not enough. We have lots, let's start using them. Now, I don't think that the existing staff recommendation honestly goes far enough. If we're to vote right now, I'd like, if we're keeping the 2 hour in place, I'd like to take it to midnight and kill it at midnight. I would vote for that. But 10 p.m., I believe it's too early because of the fact that you can park at 8 p.m. all the way to 2 a.m. And
But how do you dismiss the numbers, How do you, I mean, they're doing an analysis of the parking.
I dismiss the numbers because I'm a transportation engineer and I've done preferential parking districts for the last 10 years, and I've seen them. I've looked at them. Just because there's standard hours, it doesn't have to be the same citywide. There are special instances, special situations. You look at things differently. For information, there are preferential parking districts for holidays and weekends only in some cities. We don't do that here, but they were done for a reason. So I don't dismiss that. I respect the work, but I also can tell you, and this was told to us by staff, that a 10 p.m. cutoff will allow you to park at 8 p.m. An 8 p.m. cutoff will allow you to park at 6 p.m.
So why didn't you pick 12 p.m. or 12 a.m.?
Chairperson Kubius and commissioners, the goal of the 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. was really the 8 p.m. hour that you're talking about, where you would be available. It was essentially non-regulated parking after 8 p.m. What that does is it allows the residents to get home first. And then after the 8 p.m. hour, it becomes available for the businesses or for the residences or for whoever wants it. It's extending that from right now where it's 4 p.m. And that's the impact we're hearing from all the residents, is when I get off at 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, there's no space available. So what this does is it pushes that until 8 p.m. I don't disagree that 8 p.m. may not be late enough. But as I said earlier, this is something where I'm looking at having the consistency that would blend with the rest of the metered hours and everything else. If this isn't enough, I would prefer, and I would have to check with legal on it, but I would prefer not to bring back to you in 3 months, 4 months, a study and go back out and get signatures again. I would love to be able to use this petition to revisit this issue if needed. And if we wind up with surveys hypothetically that are similar to this, and we don't see any impact from whatever changes would be made, then yes, we would look at going with a more restrictive, whether that's 1 hour, whether it's extending until midnight. It depends on when that problem is happening and what residents are being most impacted by that problem. So just like with Sundays are not necessarily, it's one of the 7 days. If we can solve the problem on 6 of the 7 days and be consistent with everything else, that's the goal. If Sundays become a problem, we absolutely include it in.
Okay.
So I have an inquiry.
Please, no outbursts. We're trying to deliberate, ma'am. I understand. We had our time.
So
we've heard. Thank you.
Whichever iteration of this that we move forward with, can you let me know if residents are not satisfied, if the restaurant is not satisfied, if we're not satisfied, what exactly needs to happen? Does another petition go out? Because I'm afraid that nobody's going to be happy with this. So what are our next steps, whatever we move forward with today?
Commissioner Barchesov, what we've typically seen with these, where it is finding that delicate balance, is generally you have put a change in place, and if that change doesn't meet whatever the demands are, we hear about it from all of the residents. We definitely get the phone calls. This hasn't solved the problem. What's the problem? And we will go out and do further studies, do the same exact occupancy counts again, including later into the night if needed, or Sundays if needed, as a result of this feedback, and bring a change in the recommendation and say, based on the petition that was received before and based on the changes that were made, what we're now seeing is this. And we would be able to bring that back to you, I believe, within a year as a impact related to the changes that were made.
And then my last inquiry was, what was it? I had one more thing I wanted to say.
I'll give you some time to think about it. I understood your comments. Well, I don't concur about the 10 versus the 8 o'clock or the 12 midnight. I concur with our commissioner on that comment. What are your comments on the 1 hour versus 2 hours, please?
Commissioner Gonzalez, again, it really comes down to we're focusing a lot of the energy on the area toward Central. The area toward Columbus, all of those are residents that are parking there. Some of them on Columbus, some of them on neighboring streets. So Columbus or Myrtle or Milford, there could be residents that aren't finding parking available on their street, and they're coming over to Lexington to park. If they can park for an hour versus 2 hours, it makes a difference. So again, it's finding the balance where the goal would be 100% occupancy and solving all of the parking needs. Sometimes it's not achievable, but in this case, what we've seen based on the numbers and going out there, again, the numbers are a snapshot of what's happening out there. It's not this is every single day. Events would obviously take the numbers up for larger events, but at the same time, with it blended, this gives a fairly good picture of what's out there at this time with no restrictions after 6 p.m., which is essentially after 4 p.m. So I think any restriction after 4 p.m. until whatever time, obviously staff went with a consistent regulation as a start, but until whatever time would assist the residents.
I remember my inquiry. I had a question about the surveys. So you mentioned that there were staff surveys, and I agree with Chairperson that numbers are very important, and I solely rely on data when I do my work during the day. Can you tell me exactly what those surveys consisted of, how often you were there, what these average consist of? You know, you mentioned the hours of 6 to 10, but were you just there at 6? Were you there throughout the entire segment? Can you give me the details about the methodology?
Commissioner Bartusoff, very good question. It is challenging to get a snapshot that makes the most sense. However, we were there on the 21st, the 22nd, the 23rd, the 31st of January, and again on the 1st and the 14th of February. It was a range of time. Typically, every couple hours, we would go and take a snapshot of this is what it looks like at this time, and then blend that across. We specifically carved off the 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. time frame to also look at that individually because the residents were complaining about the after hours effects. Typically, yes, 4 to 8 would also make sense. There's a lot of times that make sense, but we really carved it off and took a snapshot of the 6 to 10 and saw that, yes, when the 2-hour preferential parking is in place during the day, it has an effect. It does limit the amount of long-term parking you get there. And in the evening, when there isn't, the parking occupancy does increase. So, like I said, regardless of which change it is, any change where it restricts parking, whether it's 2-hour, 1-hour permit only, and whether it's till 8 p.m., 10 p.m., or midnight, would obviously make a positive impact for the residents' parking availability.
Madam Chair, if I,
Yes, Mr. Galanian.
if I may add a couple of things to Mr. Dombrowski's comments. On the occupancy count, as Tad mentioned, from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. versus 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., there was only a 7% non-resident parking increase. So during those hours, we only noticed, obviously given on those dates, it was only a 7% increase. And again, I have to repeat myself that we still don't know if there were restaurant customers, business customers, or non-residents who are there. Now, also like you to be mindful of not creating a ripple effect in more restrictive hours or duration. We don't want to push the problem to other streets, in which case those residents now are going to complain and come to you with petition to have preferential parking on their streets because of this ripple effect.
Madam Chair, you made a very good point about the information that we receive from staff, and I acknowledge that, and I thank you for all that information. However, in the discussions that we've had, I haven't heard anything about and the importance of doing a mixed-use solution here in the long run. That's why I think some of us might have been asking for a bit of time, but at the same time, I can certainly appreciate that there needs to be some solution on this, and I think staff has said they've analyzed it, although you weren't there on Sundays. I understand you candidly stated that. It seems like a solution is appropriate sooner rather than later. Is there some way that we could suggest the notion that the restaurant owner commit to looking into and potentially solving some of the issues as it relates to using the Orange Street parking structure, as it relates to using the parking behind the furniture store? I've heard comments by the owner, but they were kind of very conditional, as I understood them. Is there some way that we can get that on the floor to get some momentum?
And that's what I was going to bring up. And I agree with you because the furniture store is there today. He might be gone tomorrow.
Right.
But we have control over the city lot. Also, having 4 different lots in 4 different locations and spreading it around, it's easier to have a hub where you're parking all your vehicles. And honestly, walking distance is very close.
Right.
And I do understand the fact that we will be pushing, and that's unavoidable. I mean, you know, we do this here in a month. We have the next street filling out a petition. But if the goal, if we can push it far enough where the Warren Street garage is closer than these other streets, we might have a win situation here.
Wow.
Chairperson Yakubian, members of the Commission,
Yeah.
these are certainly very good ideas, and we can most certainly ask the business owner or suggest it to the business owner. But since there is no regulatory or any permit process that we're considering right now, we cannot make that a requirement. The subject of this discussion is preferential parking on the 300 block of Lexington Avenue.
Well, we can't make it I appreciate we can't make it, how would you say, legal because of what's on the table now. I heard the restaurant owner comment about being a good neighbor. And is it possible to ask him to make comments relative to that this will happen?
As I mentioned, we can always ask, but we cannot make it a requirement of preferential parking.
I understand.
I mean, I definitely feel that the complaints from the residents is overwhelming, and it cannot be neglected.
Concurred.
And at the same time, the best food in town is sitting right there, right? and the best ambiance. So we cannot leave here without making any decisions. And I look at staff. I know you want to go with your recommendation. I know I'm pushing it a little bit higher, the hours.
Yeah, I just think the balance,
Right.
The balance is there. I'm not saying that's the solution, and I'm not saying that the staff recommendation, alternative 1 to 10 p.m. is going to solve the problem. But we have to, as commissioners, I believe, look at the little pictures, as Mr. Golanian so poignantly pointed out, that if you push it, Commissioner Sahakian, just a little more, that I'm afraid is going to cause the ripple effect that shouldn't be happening in this situation. I agree with what's been mentioned here about a study. I do believe, and as Commissioner Kirkchan was bringing up in his discussion, there's so much change going on in that area now. It's kind of trying to look in our crystal ball and find the perfect solution right now and then. And I do believe that things are changing and things will settle and the dust will settle and there's going to be a different dynamic of people living there. And I don't want to just cast these ideas into the wind until things settle. I would like to go with the staff recommendation with the understanding after, I'm sure staff will get the earful if this isn't working for them to come. But I do believe this is the right balance. I think once you go to 12, then it's leaning heavily in one direction. And as you said, we have to take everyone into consideration. I heard from the people today, from most residents, the issue of the work. When they came home 5, 6, there's no parking. I think this recommendation is a good first, shot at this whole idea of, when someone comes home from work, they're going to hopefully find parking. So I am really adamant in sticking with that alternative 1 till 10 p.m. When I'm completely open to the idea of revisiting it. But unless this is being done in a big district analysis, I don't want to deviate from the expertise of staff and how they see these things happen, because they have warned about the ripple effect too many times, and I don't want to create that, looking at the bigger picture.
If I may, thank you, Chairperson Yakubian and the commissioners. This will also make it for a more efficient enforcement of parking violations, that we can tell everyone that within this neighborhood you have until 10 p.m., whether you're on meters, and as Commissioner Sahakian said, it's inevitable that we are going to get more petitions for neighboring streets. As you mentioned, the mixed-use developments come in, more energy in this area, there'll be more parking demand. So as we get these applications, we like to be able to say that we've tried it on Lexington 300 blocks, and 2-hour parking until 10 p.m. works, or after a year we do another study, we include weekends and Sundays, and it didn't work, we've changed it until 12, and let's apply that to your street as well. So I think it will help us out in the long run with enforcement as well.
Is that
Okay, based on that, I'm ready to move the staff's recommendation with the understanding that we will create a committee internally with a rep from the business and a rep from the residents to take this further, because I don't think that preferential parking is the only solution. And there are other steps we need to take. And I'll be more than happy to assist with that process.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ma'am,
it's been closed.
It's been closed. Exactly. We've closed public hearing. Would anyone else? Are you satisfied?
I stand by my position. I think at this point, the only way in which I'm comfortable moving with the staff recommendation is that we have a friendly understanding with the business owner that there will be a good faith effort to open up that furniture store's parking lot in the time being, because there is this understanding that you can open it up and use it at any time. I'd like you to, I would recommend that you use that now to provide some temporary relief. And I would only move forward if we have an understanding from staff that if residents are not satisfied with the way we're moving forward, that they not have to wait another almost year, exactly, like they did since last April when this started, to make changes to this permit. So I'm willing to move forward, but only if it's easy for residents to come back to us and give us an update and get additional feedback from staff to make changes if possible, and not have that taken a year.
Commissioner Barchesov, I would like to take this opportunity just to apologize to the residents, because the construction on Central that was happening, Central was torn up. There was no parking available on Central. There was no other way for us to bring this forward any sooner. And we did understand that you have the daily impacts of that. The construction project on Central, which didn't get completed till the end of the year, the impacts from that were the only reason that this took as long as it did.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I just want to add that parking restriction is not necessarily a bad thing.
Please.
There are plenty of neighborhoods in the county of Los Angeles, like Santa Monica, West Hollywood, Pasadena, downtown, that all charge ridiculous rates for parking. And it's not because they don't have enough business, it's because they get a lot of business, and they get a lot of people driving in, and they are successful with those high, ridiculous parking rates. So I welcome mixed use. I welcome people to come to this neighborhood, but with the mixed use that we're bringing to downtown Glendale, all of those residents are going to be walking to Phoenicia. They're not going to be driving there. And I think that we shouldn't be looking at parking restrictions as something that's negative to business. I think it's good for business, because that only means that there's high demand for people wanting to come to this community. And with the mixed use that's coming into this downtown area, a lot of people are going to be walking, they're going to be biking. They're not going to be using their cars because it's going to be inconvenient to find a parking spot. And frankly, I think that's what City Council is looking forward to relieve congestion. And we're looking for ways like bus rapid transit and bicycle planning. these are the ways of the future, and we need to incorporate that into the conversation as well.
I just want to thank, I don't want to gloss over it, Commissioner Sahakian, you offering your valuable, extremely valuable time to assist in participating in finding an alternative solution. I definitely, you're the one who thinks the most out of the box, so your input is greatly appreciated. I concur with what you said, and so if we're at this point ready to, you have made your motion.
Yeah, it's basically alternative number 2.
No, number 1.
No, number 1. Alternative number 1.
I thought you had some other things to add to that I heard earlier.
I'm open to suggestions.
We're opening up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had said that earlier relative to a more mixed-use solution.
Yes.
And
well, that still stands. That still stands.
Commissioners, with all due respect, again, we cannot make that a condition of the preferential parking permit that's in front of you.
Right. It's an understanding, not a requirement.
But an understanding that includes the staff, the residents,
yes,
the owner,
yes,
and this commission.
Yes,
that we will be seeking a more mixed-use type of solution.
Yes.
Out of the box, right?
Yeah, and I was very disappointed to understand that this has taken a year, and I don't understand why it took a year, but I think I heard that comment. But I totally support the notion that we've got to put a calendar on this. We've got to put a calendar on it. We cannot let this go on and on. I don't think we should just be left for the residents to have to come and complain. I think our city staff should be monitoring this.
Absolutely.
This is a serious matter. We heard it this evening. It's going to be in other places. We need a mixed-use solution, not just a regular, normal solution.
Yes.
And that's what we have to look at.
And one other thing that I want to bring up on we're going to see more construction on Central, and it should be a requirement for employees to be shuttled in to these sites, just like the Americana did, instead of allowing them to park in the neighborhood. So honestly, we failed with that. Easily, we could have told them park in the city lot and require them to have a van shuttle their employees back and forth to the construction site.
I have a question to our city attorney. I want to wear my real estate hat, and going back to mixed-use suggestion, in real estate, there's something that's called disclosure, and everybody has to disclose when they're buying property, or actually when they're selling property. That's Section 1102 of California Civil Code. Can we add sort of downtown disclosure for the property owners, for them to go and say, you are renting a property in downtown Glendale. These are the conditions. For them to rent a place or buy a place knowingly and willingly that this kind of problems exist. Because this problem will be revisited coming up. And for us to put residents through an anguish like this, if we can avoid it by disclosure, I think we should.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Kurkujian, and your question is whether the Commission can do this tonight?
I'm not talking tonight. I'm talking overall. I mean, when we're talking about mixed use, and that could be a mixed use solution for when we're trying to think outside the box.
The question is whether the council can think outside the box and put some kind of regulations and restrictions on people disposing of property, buying and selling property within the city of Glendale?
Yes.
Possibly, yes.
Because, I mean, people disclose property when you're buying a property next to Burbank Airport. They tell you there's airport noise, for example. You're right next to railroad tracks. You're buying whatever kind of property. You're next to the wash. And you can say you're buying property downtown LA, and these are ramifications of living downtown LA. And people who want to live there, let them live there by choice.
There are certain disclosure requirements that are mandated by the state, such as disclosure requirements with respect to materials that may be on the property, like the materials that are, hazardous. There are different kind of disclosure requirements with respect to ownership. I'm not familiar with the ones that Glendale is putting on it. I would have to research the issue, but I don't think it's something that cannot be done. It may be done.
Maybe that's something we should, because I bet next application is going to come from Wilson once the construction is complete around Wilson and Central.
Commissioner Kurchian, what the city does is that through the development process, the city will impose various requirements on developers and people who are developing property in Glendale. And it goes through that process, like what happened with Americana. With every project in the city, there's various trades that the city engages in order to allow a project to go through within legal means.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion?
Yes.
Seconded? Alternative one?
So alternative one motion with the understanding and with staff's assistance to put together a first meeting, and within the next 2-3 weeks, with a rep from the restaurant, a rep from the residents, 1 or 2 commissioners and staff, to further discuss what other means we have on hand to alleviate the situation. Anything
Noted.
else you guys want to add?
Let's have Mr. Glenn.
Yeah.
That's
I like that out of the box suggestion.
there we go.
However, I would highly recommend to the Commission that we go through this item in front of you and focus on the motion, whatever your motion may be.
Right.
And then once you vote on it and it gets approved, either way, then we can talk about the discussion informally, not as a commission with representatives from the residents and the restaurant.
Yes, but I'm not attaching anything to the motion.
Okay.
So
just want to clarify
just a
that.
commitment, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not attaching, it's just a commitment,
So
basically.
just for the record, then I recommend that cite the motion, take votes on it, and then we can further discuss the other items.
Okay, you need a second.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay. All right then.
Roll call.
Roll call, yes, Anush.
Commissioner Kirkjian,
Yes?
Commissioner Sahakian,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Bartrusov,
Yes.
Chairperson Yakubian.
Yes. Next item, Anush.
Item 7,
I'm
Commission.
sorry, Commissioners, if you like to
Bring that discussion up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is the
Commissioner, I'm
opportunity.
sorry,
I think I
Sahakian.
discussed it enough.
Yeah.
That's what I'd
Mr.
like
Go-
to do.
Mr. Golan, is that possible? Can we put together something in the next few weeks, as
Absolutely.
Mr. Sahakian suggested?
And then we have the restaurant owner concurring with that and some representatives from the
Very good.
Yeah, I see
neighbor.
nods from both sides. What I'd like to do is, after we implement the PPD, I'd like to do an occupancy study and find out what's the occupancy after implementation. And I don't want to wait 5-6 months for that. So a month after implementation, maybe we can do a study. I know you guys have your hands full,
Right.
but
So,
it's important.
Yes, Commissioner Sahakian, I was going to suggest a 3-month period to
3
give it
months.
some time for it to settle and
Okay.
people get used to it. And then most definitely, we'll bring a report back to the Commission with our new occupancy counts and inform you of any changes in the situation.
So that can be set as an agenda item in about 3 months.
I can always bring it as a report. It doesn't have to be agendized.
One more thing for the staff. If they can check with neighborhood services if there are any cases and whatnot, if there are any issues.
We can certainly do that, Commissioner Kirkjian.
And in case it's not clear, I just want to let residents know and business owners know as well that they can contact us. And I would love to hear from both sides after this permit has been in place, just to see what the perspective is like. I'd like to know what impact it has on the business. I would like to know how residents feel after this has been implemented. We want to hear from you. So our emails are all on the city website if you look up the commissions. Thank you for doing that.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Commissioner Bartosov. We'd like to hear from them, see what their train of thought is while we're discussing.
Right, and there are a lot of people that can't attend these meetings. Of course, we all know how long they run sometimes, and your time is very precious to you, and it is for us too. So if it's easier for you to just send us an email, I would love to hear from you either way. Thank you.
Time for another session of Brown Act training. Sensitive issue. But I want to thank everybody for coming. It's not easy taking time off, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Anush, can I have the next?
Item 7, Commission Staff Comments Updates.
Mr. Golanian?
Yes, onto a more pleasant subject, Commissioners. I'm very pleased to announce that we have scheduled the workshop for the pedestrian safety concerns that we have been working on for April 17th. There will be announcements, news release.
Monday?
It'll be half a day for the community and half a day for the task force. So we'll focus on education for the public, and then more technical aspects and priority and strategy for the task force. On the
Task force, are we talking about the engineers and?
No, the pedestrian safety.
Just the okay.
Yes.
Oh, this isn't you're referring to the workshop?
Yes, the workshop I'm referring to.
Are they not doing a
No.
a technical this year?
No.
Was that not requested or?
Well, they feel that they had already gone through that process, and there's a draft implementation action plan that we're going to resurrect and start off and see where that takes us.
Has there been no technical advancements or changes that they might want to highlight in the 5 years?
And that will be part of that half-a-day
I see.
workshop.
Okay,
with,
very
task
good. That
force.
is good news. Excellent.
We haven't pinpointed the hours yet. We're still working with consultants, California folks. So either or, we can do it during the day. If they're available in the evening, preferably we can do it in the evening, but we're still working with them. But the date, we booked the date to make sure that they don't commit to another activity on that day. Okay. But there will be a press release, there will be public announcements on GTV6 and everywhere we can to get the word out to the community.
Okay, I just want to if we are tailoring.
That will be our goal as well, depending on their availability.
Has a venue been decided? Will it be the police?
Anush, have we confirmed the police community room?
Okay.
I think the comment about community being able to come is really, really important. I mean, this is a sensitive item, as we all know.
Yes.
Madam Chair, under this number 7, I just have a couple comments, please.
Absolutely.
First of all, we had this very, very good news, and thank you very much, Rubik and others who commented on the bus rapid transit and where we stand with that process. It sounded very, very promising. We're way up on the list. I mean, we could have gotten a report that we weren't way up that high, and then we wouldn't have been as happy. Given that, and given some of the discussions that we had at our last meeting, and also some discussions I've had with some representatives at Metro regarding the fact that it seems like there's not going to be a bond issue for the enhancement of the public transportation systems, especially as it relates to light rail, until 2016. One, because it's right around the corner, 2014, and then there's a lot of other reasons also. But what I'm hearing is it's really, really important that we as a city work very, very closely through COG and through Metro, and obviously through our council member who sits on the board. Is there anything that the commissioners or Madam Chair that we can do to ask the City Council in some ways where we could potentially develop a strategic plan that Glendale will become engaged in, even to the point of maybe getting some consultants on board down the line, so that we communicate to Metro how important we believe this bond that's going to apparently happen in 2016.
Yeah, and Commissioner, you had echoed that, or you're echoing what you brought up last time.
Yes.
Is that let's get the focus.
But not getting ahead of the council in any way. I think just asking the council, maybe from this body, with this body's permission, to officially ask them, is there a way that this commission can help? Because there's a lot of work that is being done by a lot of people at staff level, but I think there's a priority that it's not that far away, 2016 November, and what it takes to get things processed. I think we need to communicate to Metro that this city is very serious about wanting to make sure we're not a missing link. And then when we're talking about this item that was presented today, and you might remember that there was a comment that another part of the valley is being kind of hesitant on whether they're going to have rail or they're going to have the VR.
Right,
well,
yeah.
The question which I didn't want to ask, but anything that's lined up with this has to consider a potential rail location. So that whole study is very, very critical to the city, and I think not just to the city, but to the whole network as a whole in the county. So I would just like to figure out a way to ask the city council officially, how can this commission help to get to in front of Metro at the executive level, at the professional staff level, and at the political level? And how do we as a city communicate that in addition to saying this is where we want these lines to be? I mean, so that's what I'm talking about, the need of potentially of a consultant that can help starting to lay those things out, coming from the city, coming from the people that live here and have businesses here.
I mean, technically, it's a business plan that you're going to go and propose to Metro.
Right.
And I absolutely agree with you. I mean, with staff with their workload, only consultant is going to come through on something.
And part of that consultant responsibility would be to obviously have a dialogue with Metro. So we're working with them, not against them.
Right. And then, I mean, this commission can call for a meeting, ask for a meeting with Metro with council's permission, just to go and, discuss with them. I don't see why that can't happen.
So, Madam Chair, I'm just requesting that we get a formal communication to the City Council.
We can do that. Do we have any, what from staff's vantage point, are we consultants, have they been talked about to be brought in?
Chairperson Yagubian, commissioners, at this point in time, the only thing that Metro's asked for has been a list of priorities. And we are working through COG with our counterparts in Pasadena and Burbank for the quote-unquote missing link to put it high on the priority list, at least for our cities and for our Council of Governments. And as you mentioned, Council Member Najarian is on the board, and he's fully supportive, at least of the concept. At this point, again, it's not they're not requesting a working document, a concept design, any of that sort. They just want a title, a brief description, and an estimated cost. And we are prepared to submit that.
I think, if I may paraphrase your
Please,
concern,
please.
You don't want to miss the boat. I think you'd like to get a jump on the whole idea. So, but you're so familiar. I mean, staff is so familiar with this project. But this is a big thing. I mean, it's whatever we can communicate to City Council.
What I'm thinking is, and these projects and priorities are fine. They need to be done, but maybe attach a vision to each one of them to give it more of an importance and to justify it. And I think that puts us ahead of other cities. Because we've done our homework and then we're going to be taken more seriously by showing this is what we see in the future.
Absolutely. Commissioner Sahakian, we can certainly do that. There has been studies done in the past by consultants, Metro's consultants, and the only reason it didn't move forward was because of lack of funding. Mm-hmm. So with this opportunity, and they have extended the deadline to submit the list of projects. So we are not going to miss the boat. We are working on it. We will add a vision, and we'll go dust off the old studies and see what we can update on it to make it a more robust application. But again, at this time, only thing they're taking is a name, estimated cost, and a description of work.
Yeah, I just don't want us to respond only to what they're asking for. I think we need to be more proactive. And in order to really communicate with Metro down the line, it's good to have some level of community input, not just from the commission and not just from our professional staff, but, where stops might be, how this might connect to this and to other parts of the system. I just wanted to try to get it to a level where perhaps the City Council will look at committing some current studies on where would this light rail and how would it connect to potentially this east-west connection. Because someone could say this will supersede a light rail. I can almost see it when I heard the comment, and that's concerning, because while certainly this is a good system and it's multimodal, what this might imply is the light rail should be going north-south, just like it was once on Brand,
Right.
to connect to this east-west. But I don't think we should wait to see what they're asking for. We should give them what they want, but we should go further than that, I believe, and get a commitment from the City Council to figure out a way to go beyond that, with political understanding and everything.
Agree.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And
Can we get that?
Yes,
yeah.
Yakubian and commissioners definitely heard your opinion. I appreciate that. It's a welcoming ideas, and I will check with our city manager for a conduit that you can start that communication with City Council and see how we can make that move forward.
Thank you.
On a staff level, though, I don't want to beat the dead horse, but that's where we are limited at that.
Sure, and Rubik, I don't want to cast any negative on the work that's been done by staff on this whole topic. It's just that it just seems like because we have so much going on, we might need some outside help.
I'll let everyone know.
Okay.
And we can maybe have feedback at our next meeting, please, if possible, if you can arrange something with the city manager.
Certainly.
Right. Real quick, Ruby, did you want to give a quick update on we've had our second pedestrian subcommittee meeting. It's going well. The
Chairperson Yakubian, we did have when was that, Anush? I forget. The second task force meeting. Regardless, it was a couple of weeks ago. The police department staff made a presentation on the collision statistics, and that has gone public. It's available for public to view. It showed the hot spots within the city. It was very eye-opening, the number of accidents and the fatalities and the demographics. Again, there was lively discussions, and task force members have come up with some really good ideas, and we have taken note of those, and we are waiting to go through this workshop with Walk California members, and they have an agenda put together that we are going to forward to you for review and comments, and if you'd like additional things added to it or if they missed something, April 17 is the date set up, and we are hoping after that we reconvene with the task force, put the strategies and priorities together in an action plan, and take it to your commission, the full commission, and then to City Council for recommendations and the next step forward.
Very good. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I do have one item, and I emailed earlier during the week for the City of LA Taxi Cab Administrator Tom Dreschler to come out here and make a presentation on the transportation network companies. It's extremely important. I mean, I'm sure you're reading the articles. Seattle has over 3,500, 4,000 of them. City of LA, it's close to 5,000 of them. And there's no regulations whatsoever. And it's a concern. It's a concern of mine as a commissioner. So I'd like to move forward with that presentation. I know he's not available next month because the fourth Monday he's on vacation, but after that, if possible, is very knowledgeable. And I think we're a small city, and I think we can start something. We can spearhead
You're right.
something and let other cities look at us and say,
Exactly.
Glendale has regulations on these vehicles now. So
I think
Commissioner Sakian, if the rest of the commissioners are agreeable with that, we'll definitely agendize it for May 26th.
I just have one comment about that. I know that at the last commission meeting, you were in here, Mr. Sakian, about possibly getting an update from city staff about the CPUC decision. I know at this point this has come up twice now, and we've had representatives from taxi companies coming out and speaking against these entities and the things that they do at various cities. I think that it would be prudent for us to wait on that decision. I've heard the comments that this gentleman has made from the city of Los Angeles, and I know his position on the issue. I know that that is contrary to what the mayor of Los Angeles feels. So I'm just a little concerned about the conversations we're having at the commission level being very lopsided. And I think that if we're going to have conversations about these kind of entities, that we invite people from Uber or Lyft to come and address these concerns that we have. There's a lot of talk about them not being regulated, and then on the other side, we hear them being regulated by the state of California. So I don't know who to believe anymore, but I do know this particular person's position, and I just want to make sure that we're having a balanced conversation here. And meanwhile, the CPUC has not yet made a decision on what they're doing. So
the CPUC, Commissioner Bartasarov,
there was an appeal.
They have made a decision on it. They set up something like a whole number of regulations. I think like 28 different regulations for them. It's a pretty complex set of regulations, as complex as any. They just haven't started enforcing it, to my knowledge, because they don't have enough staff at this point. But they were definitely going to ramp up at least a month ago when I last looked at this issue. But they do have regulations statewide, and they have obtained jurisdiction over it, which is the reason why I'm not aware of any lawsuit yet that challenges the jurisdiction of the state over these transportation network companies.
Yeah, I'm just open to the dialogue. I just hope that we maintain a balanced approach when we invite speakers to come and speak. I would like to hear from other entities as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you have any names, because I do want to hear both sides. At this time, my concern is public safety, and I believe there was an incident where there was an accident and the driver wasn't insured. I'm also concerned with congestion because I'm hearing Seattle is having an issue with congestion with these vehicles roaming around, and so. It's not just safety. It's also if they were using bicycles, maybe I'll go along with it, but they're not. So absolutely, yeah, we're open to hear both sides.
Yeah, but
and I don't know what Tom's position on it is. Honestly, all I know that his administrator and is extremely knowledgeable.
Yeah, I just quickly Googled his name, and you can find all sorts of articles with quotes.
Well, and Commissioner Sahakian, I love that idea of. Yeah, I do agree with you that we are a small enough city to be able to make something amazing happen and kind of set the bar, kind of take it. So, yeah, and I do agree. We should have as many different points of view as possible so we can be educated on it. So I would, if you have any names too, anybody, any idea, well, drop me a line, ask. If we can just put him down for, or at least ask if he's available in May. That would be nice.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair, I just have a quick one. I wanted to, first of all, thank other commissioners for the comments during the public hearing. It was good to have that dialogue among us, and thanking the staff for guiding us through some of the legal issues that we were trying to get on the table. And thank you for the facilitation of the meeting. It was a juicy evening.
Juicy, yes.
Thank you for that.
Nice adjective, yeah. Very good. All right, Anush. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Aura.
Actually, I have one more point about MTA, and I want to pick up where Commissioner Gonzalez left about involving the public, and that is MTA I think had a meeting, and they're going to have one more meeting for San Fernando Road West, and they're proposing 4 bridges over there, and I don't think commission members, maybe except Aram, knows what's going on with those 4 bridges, perhaps come over here and do a presentation to us as well, for everybody to get involved, and all the commission members to get involved, also members of the public, for us to voice an opinion and set a stand about those bridges that are being proposed. And I think most of that traffic is going to come through Glendale, LA traffic. So maybe we have to invite somebody from there, Mr. Golanian. What are your thoughts?
Chairperson Yakubian, Commissioner Kurkjian, just briefly, in case somebody is not aware of it, it's actually Metro who is proposing, and their consultants, several alternatives as a result of the CPUC's decision to close off Doran Street crossing, that they are proposing to build flyover and the connection to the Fairmont existing R flyover for 2 points of access to the area on the other side of the tracks in the city of Los Angeles. And as you mentioned, all of these alternatives happen to be within the city of Glendale. The Metro staff and their consultants have held 2 community meetings. It was in that business area. Members of the community and our association within the city of Glendale, some of them attended the evening meeting, and some of the business owners attended the meeting during the day, where they introduced these alternatives. They were not very well received, but they're still working on it. I have met with a consultant separately for Metro, and as Council Member Najarian at a council meeting noted, there's another alternative that is preferable to us. Obviously, it takes away construction away from Glendale, and we believe it's a viable alternative. Councilmember Najarian and I presented to 3 homeowners association last week at their combined meeting, a joint meeting, and we'd be more than happy to ask Don Sepulveda of Metro, who is spearheading this process and the effort, and their consultants, to give the same presentation they gave the homeowners and the business owners to your commission, if all of your commissioners agree to it. And then, if you like, I can send. They have sent out an email to certain people on their email list. I don't think everybody got it. It was just their effort on their stakeholders. I'll be more than happy to forward that email to you. They essentially are doing a survey on their proposed alternatives. Doesn't include the city of Glendale's preferred alternative yet, but the consultant has not ruled it out, our proposed solution, and they have promised to look into it further and let us know what the result is. So, a long story short, we can schedule if the commissioners are desired.
Our proposal is a 5th alternative to whatever they had, the four proposals they have?
Yes, Commissioner Kurkjian.
Okay. We seem to enjoy having more knowledge. We like knowledge, so I'm all for that. Is that right, Alex? All right. Please.
I'll make the contact and see when they'll be available.
Great, thank you.
So, in other words, we're basically working on MTA and Tom Drescher for future scheduling.
And Uber and
Uber, yeah.
Some other.
Yes.
Basically, for us to make sound decisions, we need to hear everything.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, very good. Anush?
Item 8, adjournment.
Motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.